Hey guys, tonight we slip into a place where wood creaks, lanterns flicker, and salt hangs thick in the air. Imagine standing on the edge of a vast Chinese harbor in the early 15th century. You feel the boards beneath your feet vibrating as something immense shifts on the water. Towering hulls, taller than city walls, sway gently like dark mountains. Their sails stretch into the night sky, blotting out stars. The smell of pitch, wet rope, and steamed rice drifts around you. You probably won't survive this, let's be real. If you actually had to climb one of these massive decks with its endless rigging and the very real risk of falling overboard into inky depths, you'd think twice before romanticizing exploration. But from this safe distance, wrapped in your blanket, you're fine. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand by the docks of Nanjing, the Ming Dynasty's bustling capital. Lanterns bob like fireflies above the black surface of the Yangtze River. The night is alive with the thrum of human voices, sailors shouting commands, dock workers groaning under the weight of cargo, and the deep gong of temple bells echoing over the city. The treasure fleet is stirring. Hundreds of ships, some stretching over 400 feet in length, crowd the harbor. Their hulls are lacquered to a glossy shine, each one bristling with oars, masts, and painted eyes meant to ward off evil spirits of the sea. You crane your neck, trying to take in their sheer size, and your stomach knots with vertigo. The decks are so high above that sailors walking across them look like insects from below. A mainstream fact, these were the largest wooden ships ever built in human history, so enormous that European caravels of the same period could have fit aboard like lifeboats. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some historians argue they were too large to be seaworthy. The sheer engineering required to keep timbers aligned, nails fixed, and joints sealed may have pushed the limits of technology. It's a debate that still simmers. Historians still argue whether the treasure ships were truly as massive as described, or whether official records exaggerated to glorify the empire. For now, you believe the awe. You feel small, like a child peering up at skyscrapers, except these skyscrapers float. The night breeze brings whispers of jasmine from gardens upriver, mingling with the tang of fish drying on racks. Somewhere a gull shrieks, impatient for scraps.
The night stretches into
the harbor
dawn,
itself is
and
like
you're
a stage.
still there at the edge
You're
of
not
the
the only
harbor,
spectator.
blinking at the emptiness
Courtiers
left
in
behind.
embroidered robes hover
The
near
ships
the
have
docks,
slipped away,
murmuring
and the
about
silence
omens.
that follows
Street
them
hawkers
is
sell fried
unsettling.
dumplings to curious onlookers,
You lean against a
while
wooden
children
post,
chase each
its
other with
surface
paper
damp from
lanterns.
ocean spray,
All of them are
and wonder
here
if
for
the whole
one reason:
spectacle was
to
something you
glimpse a
dreamed.
miracle about to depart.
The horizon
The
glows
Ming
faint
Emperor has
pink,
commanded
and
this
for a
fleet into
heartbeat,
existence,
it looks
and
as
every
though
plank
the
of
sea
wood,
itself
every jar
is
of
blushing.
rice, every bead of sweat
Fishing boats
has
slip
flowed
out
into this
past you,
singular moment.
small and timid
You wander
compared to
further
the
along the
giants
pier,
that just
your
departed.
fingers brushing the
Their
rough
sails
hemp
are
coils
patched,
stacked
their
like
crews
sleeping
barefoot,
serpents.
their hulls
The ships
smelling
don't
of
just
fish
creak,
guts instead
they
of pine
breathe.
resin.
Their sails
You
ripple
chuckle
like
softly
lungs
at the contrast.
expanding.
This,
Lanterns
you
hung
think,
from bows
is the
cast
reality of
ripples
most
of orange
seafaring,
across the waves.
not the polished
In that
perfection
shimmering
of the
light,
treasure
you
fleet.
catch glimpses of carved
But the
dragon
treasure fleet
prows,
isn't
mouths
built for
open
catching
in permanent
fish.
roars,
It's
ready
built
to
to project
swallow
the
the
Ming
horizon.
Dynasty's will
A
across
sailor
oceans,
nearby catches your
to
stare and
remind
laughs.
distant
His
kingdoms
teeth are
that
stained
the Son
dark
of Heaven
from
in
beetle nut.
Beijing can
He shot
command
something
the
about how
waves
the ocean will
themselves.
eat him alive
You
before
shift
the
your
end of the
gaze
year.
inland,
His
imagining
companion
the
smacks
man
his
whose
shoulder,
vision made this
muttering that
possible,
saying such things before
Emperor
departure is
Yongle.
bad luck.
Now,
You make
here's
a
a
note of that.
mainstream fact.
Sailors are as
Yongle wasn't
superstitious
supposed to
as
be
cats
emperor.
are about water.
He seized the throne
And
in a
yet,
coup,
deep down,
overthrowing
there's
his nephew during a
electricity in the
bloody
air.
civil war
Something
known as the
immense is
Jingnan
about to
Rebellion.
move. You
His
turn
reign
your
was
eyes
built
upward.
not on
The
gentle
moon sits
inheritance,
fat and
but on
golden above
ambition
the city
carved
walls,
in
its
steel.
reflection rippling across
Historians
the river.
still argue whether
Somewhere in
Yongle's
the
maritime
shadows, a
projects
gong
were
strikes again.
motivated by
Low,
genuine
steady,
curiosity about the
commanding
world
silence.
or by
The
insecurity
sound
about his
vibrates through
legitimacy.
your chest like the
Sending out
heartbeat
ships
of the
the size
empire
of floating
itself.
fortresses
All
may have
eyes
been
turn
less
toward
about
the
discovery
flagship,
and more
anchored at
about
the
saying,
center of the
"Look
harbor.
at me,
Its
I
decks
belong
glow with
here."
torchlight and
quirky
banners
tidbit
bearing
about
the
Yongle?
imperial dragon
He
whip
had
in the
a
wind.
fascination with
Somewhere
giant
aboard
construction.
stands the admiral.
You remember the
Zhang He.
Forbidden City, right?
You don't know him
Palace
yet,
complex
not
that
really.
makes Buckingham
But
Palace
tonight
look like a
you'll meet
backyard
him.
shed.
And through him,
That was his
you'll
pet
begin
project,
to understand why this
The man
fleet
thought
exists,
big,
where it's meant
always.
to go, and how its
If he
fate
could have
will
built a
become
palace
one of
floating on the
history's
ocean,
most haunting
you suspect
mysteries.
he would have tried.
The air sharpens.
And so the
You hear
treasure fleet
drums
was
rolling
his
in
palace
steady
at sea.
rhythm. Sailors
with
begin hauling
officials,
ropes, and
soldiers,
the first
exotic
of the great
animals,
sails
and enough
unfurl.
silks to wrap the
The canvas
globe.
billows like a
You
ghost
rub your eyes,
rising
picturing
from
the
a tomb,
logistics.
and the ship lurches
Supplies
forward
alone
against
must
its
have been
moorings.
staggering.
The crowd gasps.
Imagine
in
organizing
unison,
snacks for
and
a
a
single
moment you
road
feel as
trip
though the
and then
entire
multiply
city of
that
Nanjing
by
has lifted
30,000
anchor,
men
ready
and
to drift
several
with
months
them
at
into the
sea.
unknown. Your heart
Rice,
beats faster.
beans, dried
The night
meats,
smells
water
like
barrels,
adventure and
medicinal
danger.
herbs,
And as
even
the first
luxury
ships
items
begin
like
to
porcelain
slide
dishes.
into the current, their
These
lanterns
ships carried
bobbing
not
like
just
stars
survival,
torn loose from
but
the heavens.
comfort.
You know you are
Because when
witnessing
you're
the
trying to
beginning of
impress foreign
something
courts,
colossal.
you don't roll up with
The
tin
mystery
plates.
waits.
You roll up with porcelain bowls and gold-threaded
Pale
robes.
sheets glowing like the
The
bellies
morning
of
breeze
whales
tugs at
gliding
your
through moonlight.
sleeves, carrying the
You tilt your
faintest
head
echo
back
of
until your
drums.
neck aches,
You
trying to
wonder what
take
it
in the
must
sheer
feel like to
expanse
stand
of
on those
canvas
decks right
above you.
now, as
It
the
looks more like a
horizon
floating
widens
city
and
than a
China
ship.
shrinks
And
into
for
a
a
line
strange moment,
behind you.
You wonder if the ocean
The ocean
feels
doesn't
insulted
care who
having
you
to
are,
carry such lumbering
emperor,
giants.
admiral,
Your
sailor,
senses
or
buzz with
stowaway.
contradiction.
It
The
will
rhythmic
test you
pounding
all
of
the
drums
same.
makes your blood race.
You close
Yet
your
the
eyes
repetitive
and
cadence
suddenly you're
lulls your
there,
mind toward calm.
swaying with the
The
deck.
smell of pine tar
The ropes
clings to
creak,
your nostrils,
gulls
sharp
scream
and
overhead,
sticky. While
and the
beneath
smell
it,
of
there's the
salt
faint
is
sweetness
sharper
of
than
honey-glazed
anything on
chestnuts
land.
being hawked from a
The
dockside
crew
vendor.
around you moves
You
with
can't help
nervous
but laugh
energy,
quietly to
checking
yourself.
knots,
The world's
scanning the
largest fleet
waves,
ever assembled,
muttering
and your stomach is
prayers.
still distracted.
One man
with
fingers a
thoughts of
small
snacks.
amulet carved of
Sailors
bone,
surge
pressing it
across
to
the
his
decks
lips.
like ants.
You can
hauling
almost
ropes
hear him
thicker
whisper
than
a
your
plea to
arm.
the sea gods.
Lanterns swing wildly with their
Historians
movements,
still
throwing
argue whether
crooked
these
shadows
voyages were
across
primarily
polished wood.
military
You hear
campaigns,
orders barked
diplomatic
in clipped
missions,
tones,
or
and though the
extravagant
words blur
flexes
together,
of power
the
disguised
urgency
as
is clear.
trade.
This is
The
not
truth,
chaos,
you
it's
suspect,
choreography.
is somewhere in
performance
between.
honed through months of
But
preparation.
standing here in your
And somewhere
imagination,
within that
swaying with the
performance,
ship,
there's a man who
it feels
orchestrates
less
it
like a
all.
grand political statement
You follow the
and more
line of
like
sight
raw
toward the
human
largest
hope
ship, the
that the
Admiral's
ocean
flagship.
won't swallow you
Its hull
before the
towers
mission's
high,
done.
studded with carved
The sun
dragons and
finally
painted
breaks the
talismans
horizon,
meant to repel
spilling
storms.
light across the waves.
There, at the bow,
It turns the
you
water
imagine
into
the figure
molten
of
gold,
Zhang He,
a
tall,
fitting mirror for a
commanding,
fleet chasing treasures
eyes
across the
reflecting
world.
firelight like coals.
You squint,
Born into
trying
a
to
Muslim
follow in your
family
mind's eye
Iran,
where they'll go.
captured as a
To
boy,
Calicut in India,
castrated,
to
and
Malacca
forced
in
into
Southeast
imperial
Asia,
service, he
even to
rose
the
not
coasts
by
of
accident,
Africa,
but by sheer
places
cunning
that
and
feel
loyalty.
impossibly far from your
Mainstream
little
historians
dockside
often
perch.
point to him as the
And
architect
then,
of Ming
as the
maritime
gulls
ambition,
die for scraps and the
diplomat,
fishermen
warrior,
haul in
and
their meager
explorer
nets,
rolled into
you
one.
wonder about the return.
But here's a quirky tidbit.
You know
Despite
something the
commanding
sailors
hundreds
don't.
of ships,
One
Zhang
day,
He personally
this fleet
suffered
will
from
vanish.
seasickness.
No triumphant
being
sails
the admiral
returning,
of the world's
no
mightiest
exotic
fleet
animals
while
paraded
quietly
through
clutching your
Beijing
stomach
streets,
at the smell of
no
salt.
drums to announce victory.
Historians still argue
Just
whether his queasiness
silence.
was exaggerated by later writers.
You pull your
or
cloak
whether
tighter
he
around
simply
your
masked
shoulders
it
and
behind
whisper
ritual
to
discipline.
yourself, almost afraid
From your
of the
spot
words.
on the dock, you sense his
What
presence.
if they never
even without
came
seeing
back
him?
because they
The
weren't
men under him
meant
move
to?
with absolute trust,
The thought
as though
lingers,
the admiral's will
heavy
reaches them
and
like invisible
uncomfortable.
strings.
But
And
before
yet,
it settles
as the
too
anchor's
deeply,
grown upward,
you distract
realize
yourself
you're
with
not
another
just
small
watching a fleet
absurdity.
leave port.
Did you
You're
know
watching
some
a
records say
statement
the
of
fleet
power.
carried court
This is the Ming
astrologers?
Dynasty's thundercloud.
Imagine being on a
echoing
wooden
across
ship in
oceans.
the middle of the
Imagine
Indian
if your neighbor
Ocean.
didn't
Your
just buy
job
a new
description
car, but
basically
rolled out a convoy
star
of aircraft
consultant.
carriers.
The
That's
waves
the
max
energy
the
here.
deck,
Not
sailors are
subtle,
puking over
not
the
quiet,
side, and
but
you're
a
in the corner
spectacle
squinting at the
designed
Big
to
Dipper,
stun
nodding
anyone who
sagely like,
glimpses it.
yes, this is a
shuffle
very
closer to the pier's
auspicious
edge.
vomit.
The water below
It makes you
churns
laugh
as oars
quietly,
dip in and
the
out,
sound carried
catching
away by the
moonlight
morning
like
wind.
flashing silver knives.
Still,
The ships
even
begin to
amid the
drift
humor,
forward,
the
one
unease
after another,
remains.
and the crowd
Because you
presses
know the
closer,
story doesn't
murmurs
end with
swelling
laughter
like a
or
hive.
giraffes. It
Suddenly,
ends
a boy
in
near
mystery.
you points skyward.
And right now,
You follow his
at
finger,
this very
expecting
moment,
maybe a shooting star.
That mystery is just
Instead,
beginning
you spot
its
a
long
paper lantern
voyage into
drifting
the
free
unknown.
from the docks. Its belly glows orange, its thin frame trembling in the wind. For a heartbeat, it seems fragile, too fragile for a night like this. But it floats higher, past the sails, past the banners, until it becomes just another faint star among the thousands above. You blink, and for a moment, you feel it's an omen, a reminder that no matter how mighty these ships appear, they're still at the mercy of wind, wave, and chance. The first cannon booms. It's not fired in war, but in ceremony. the sound rolling across the harbor like thunder. Birds scattered in a black cloud, screeching as they vanished into the sky. The drums quicken, the crowd cheers, and the flagship surges forward, its hull slicing through the Yangtze like a blade. A fact whispers in your ear. Each voyage required not only sailors and soldiers, but interpreters, doctors, scribes, and even officials trained in etiquette for foreign courts. Some records suggest there were giraffes brought back from Africa, paraded as living proof of the emperor's reach. But historians still argue whether such exotic gifts were symbols of genuine diplomacy or just props in the Ming emperor's theater of supremacy. The more you watch, the clearer it becomes. This isn't merely exploration, it's empire on parade. And you, pressed among dockside strangers, feel the weight of history pressing too. You're witnessing a fleet that will vanish into mystery, leaving behind only speculation and rumor. But of course, you don't know that yet. Tonight, you just watch in awe as the ships pass, lanterns glowing like constellations come down to Earth. The crowd's roar begins to fade as the last vessels slip into the current. Soon the dock feels strangely empty, like a stage after actors have left. You close your eyes, listening to the diminishing rhythm of drums. The vibrations shiver through your chest until they too fade into silence. All that remains is the ripple of waves licking against the pier and the faint smell of chestnuts cooling in the night air. You sigh. The treasure fleet has left, and with it, a piece of your own breath.
The night stretches into dawn, and you're still there at the edge of the harbor, blinking at the emptiness left behind. The ships have slipped away, and the silence that follows them is unsettling. You lean against a wooden post, its surface damp from ocean spray, and wonder if the whole spectacle was something you dreamed. The horizon glows faint pink, and for a heartbeat, it looks as though the sea itself is blushing. Fishing boats slip out past you, small and timid compared to the giants that just departed. Their sails are patched, their crews barefoot, their hulls smelling of fish guts instead of pine resin. You chuckle softly at the contrast. This, you think, is the reality of most seafaring, not the polished perfection of the treasure fleet. But the treasure fleet isn't built for catching fish. It's built to project the Ming Dynasty's will across oceans, to remind distant kingdoms that the Son of Heaven in Beijing can command the waves themselves. You shift your gaze inland, imagining the man whose vision made this possible, Emperor Yongle. Now, here's a mainstream fact. Yongle wasn't supposed to be emperor. He seized the throne in a coup, overthrowing his nephew during a bloody civil war known as the Jingnan Rebellion. His reign was built not on gentle inheritance, but on ambition carved in steel. Historians still argue whether Yongle's maritime projects were motivated by genuine curiosity about the world or by insecurity about his legitimacy. Sending out ships the size of floating fortresses may have been less about discovery and more about saying, "Look at me, I belong here." A quirky tidbit about Yongle? He had a fascination with giant construction. You remember the Forbidden City, right? The palace complex that makes Buckingham Palace look like a backyard shed? That was his pet project too. The man thought big, always. If he could have built a palace floating on the ocean, you suspect he would have tried. And so the treasure fleet was his palace at sea, filled with officials, soldiers, exotic animals, and enough silks to wrap the globe. You rub your eyes, picturing the logistics. Supplies alone must have been staggering. Imagine organizing snacks for a single road trip and then multiply that by 30,000 men and several months at sea. Rice, beans, dried meats, water barrels, medicinal herbs, even luxury items like porcelain dishes. These ships carried not just survival, but comfort. Because when you're trying to impress foreign courts, you don't roll up with tin plates. You roll up with porcelain bowls and gold-threaded robes. The morning breeze tugs at your sleeves, carrying the faintest echo of drums. You wonder what it must feel like to stand on those decks right now as the horizon widens and China shrinks into a line behind you. The ocean doesn't care who you are, emperor, admiral, sailor, or stowaway. It will test you all the same. You close your eyes and suddenly you're there, swaying with the deck. The ropes creak, gulls scream overhead, and the smell of salt is sharper than anything on land. The crew around you moves with nervous energy, checking knots, scanning the waves, muttering prayers. One man fingers a small amulet carved of bone, pressing it to his lips. You can almost hear him whisper a plea to the sea gods. Historians still argue whether these voyages were primarily military campaigns, diplomatic missions, or extravagant flexes of power disguised as trade. The truth, you suspect, is somewhere in between. But standing here in your imagination, swaying with the ship, it feels less like a grand political statement and more like raw human hope that the ocean won't swallow you before the mission's done. The sun finally breaks the horizon, spilling light across the waves. It turns the water into molten gold, a fitting mirror for a fleet chasing treasures across the world. You squint, trying to follow in your mind's eye where they'll go. To Calicut in India, to Malacca in Southeast Asia, even to the coasts of Africa. Places that feel impossibly far from your little dockside perch. And then, as the gulls dive for scraps and the fishermen haul in their meager nets, you wonder about the return. You know something the sailors don't. One day, this fleet will vanish. No triumphant sails returning, no exotic animals paraded through Beijing's streets, no drums to announce victory. Just silence. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders and whisper to yourself, almost afraid of the words. What if they never came back because they weren't meant to? The thought lingers, heavy and uncomfortable. But before it settles too deeply, you distract yourself with another small absurdity. Did you know some records say the fleet carried court astrologers? Imagine being on a wooden ship in the middle of the Indian Ocean, your job description basically star consultant. A wave smacks the deck, sailors are puking over the side, and you're in the corner squinting at the Big Dipper, nodding sagely like, yes, this is a very auspicious vomit. It makes you laugh quietly, the sound carried away by the morning wind. Still, even amid the humor, the unease remains, because you know the story doesn't end with laughter or giraffes. It ends in mystery. And right now, at this very moment, that mystery is just beginning its long voyage into the unknown.
The days blur together as the fleet carves a path across waters that most of the crew have never seen before. You picture the massive sails puffing like dragon lungs, the timbers groaning as the ships push beyond the safety of the familiar coastline. And you, half dreaming in the back of your mind, drift right along with them, as though the spray on your cheeks and the roll in your stomach are real. By now, the treasure fleet has left the South China Sea behind and is heading toward the trading ports of Southeast Asia, Malacca, Sumatra, Java, names that, to the sailors, must have sounded exotic and dangerous. You imagine the harbor is alive with spices, parrots shrieking from bamboo cages, markets glowing with colors of turmeric and saffron. The Ming Dynasty wasn't chasing just treasures of gold, they were chasing connections. To show up in Malacca with ships taller than coconut trees was the same as slapping down a royal calling card that said, China is here, and you will remember us. Here's your mainstream fact for the night. Zheng He, the admiral at the helm of all this, wasn't just any officer. He was a Muslim eunuch, captured as a boy during a Ming campaign in Yunnan, and raised in the imperial court. Through loyalty and brilliance, he climbed to become Yongle's trusted commander. Historians still argue whether Zheng He truly believed in the emperor's vision of outreach, or whether he was simply the perfect tool for a ruler desperate to extend his shadow. Either way, it's hard not to admire the man. Imagine navigating oceans without GPS, only stars, compasses, and sheer nerve. And because you deserve a quirky tidbit, some reports claim the fleet once brought back a giraffe from Africa. Picture it. The poor thing swaying on the deck, sailors trying to keep it fed with leaves, probably wondering what on earth this long-necked dragon was doing on a Chinese boat. In Beijing, the animal was hailed as a mythical qilin, a sign of divine favor. Honestly, if you're an emperor with imposter syndrome vibes, nothing says you belong on the throne quite like receiving a magical giraffe delivery. But behind the pomp, the seeds of doubt already stir. The logistics were staggering. Even with rice, dried beans, salted meats, and barrels of fresh water, the fleet needed constant replenishment. Ports along the route had to be both impressed and intimidated into resupplying this floating empire. Historians still argue whether the mission was sustainable at all. Was China really forging a global trade web, or was it overextending itself like a student who signs up for 7 clubs in the first week of college? You lean into the rail of your imagination, listening to the murmur of sailors at night. Some whisper prayers, others swap jokes about exotic foods they'll try in Calicut or Aden. One young man carves a tiny wooden dragon to keep in his pocket. The stars overhead seem endless, yet they must have felt terrifying too. So much blackness, so many unknowns. You remember how even modern travelers complain if their airplane Wi-Fi cuts out for 5 minutes. Now imagine weeks at sea with no land, no texts from home, no idea what storm lurks beyond tomorrow. And here's where your sleepy mind latches onto a question. Why risk it? Why pour so much into voyages that, in the end, left behind so little trace? Maybe Yongle wanted glory, maybe Zheng He wanted adventure, or maybe, and this is the thought that lingers like a chill, it wasn't really about trade at all. Some suggest the fleet was a scouting tool, a way to map distant lands, even to search for resources China could one day dominate. Others say it was meant to display heaven's mandate in action, showing foreign rulers that the Ming emperor's power flowed as far as the tides. But the ocean, though, doesn't bow to emperors. You imagine storms ripping at the sails, rain hammering the decks until the wood feels like sponge, lightning cracking so bright it blinds you. Somewhere deep down, you suspect the sea already had its own plans for this grand experiment. After all, it swallows entire civilizations without even a burp. And yet, amid the fear, there's still laughter. Maybe a cook burning rice and getting roasted by the crew. Maybe a parrot squawking insults it picked up at a Javanese market. Even in the middle of history's mysteries, humans find time to joke. Like you, half asleep now, smirking at the image of a giraffe sneezing all over some poor Ming official's silk robes. The fleet sails on. The horizon shifts from Asia to India, then to Africa. Every mile brings glory, and every mile brings them closer to the silence that history will eventually record. You pull your cloak tighter, even though it's only a dream, and wonder, did they know? Did anyone on those decks feel in the pit of their stomach that this wasn't just a voyage outward, but a slow drift into disappearance? The waves don't answer. They never do.
You're still on that deck in your imagination, though the seas have shifted again. The fleet hugs the coastlines now, moving like a slow, deliberate serpent across the map of the world. You can hear the slap of waves against the hull, the groan of oars dipped to steady the giants when winds slacken. The days pass in a blur of salt spray and gull cries, and the nights stretch longer, heavy with constellations that looked both familiar and strange. At some point, you notice how the ships themselves seem to breathe. Lanterns sway like fireflies trapped in wooden ribs. Sailors shout in rhythm as they pull ropes, and the sails billow and collapse with a sound almost like sighing. You run your hand along the imagined planks, rough beneath your palm, and think about the scale of this venture. 30,000 men, hundreds of ships, and one grand mission. History's version of a flex bigger than any Instagram reel. Here's a mainstream fact to ground you.
The Chinese compass had already been in use for centuries by the time of these voyages. While Europeans were still fumbling with dead reckoning, Zhang He's navigators carried magnetic compasses that let them sail confidently across seas others feared. Historians still argue whether this technological edge could have catapulted China into becoming the world's dominant naval power, if only they had kept going. The thought lingers, a tantalizing what if that hangs over every wave. But let's sprinkle in a quirky tidbit. Some records suggest the fleet brought along not just soldiers and merchants, but also entertainers. Imagine juggling on a rocking deck, or a musician trying to keep rhythm while half the audience is vomiting from seasickness. Still, nothing says diplomacy like rolling up to a sultan's court with your own traveling talent show. And yet, as impressive as it all sounds, you start to notice cracks in the illusion. Supplies spoil, fresh water goes foul, diseases creep through the cramped quarters. Even the most disciplined sailor has moments of despair. You lean back against the rail, hearing the whispers of men who fear the storms more than foreign armies. You picture their amulets, their whispered prayers, their desperate bribes to the sea gods. Historians still argue whether the treasure fleet truly improved China's standing abroad or whether it simply drained resources. Some say it opened trade routes that fed the empire with luxuries like pepper, ivory, and gems. Others claim it was little more than a show of force, one that burned through silver and manpower without lasting benefit. You tilt your head, wondering which side of that argument feels truer in the creak of the deck beneath your feet. Dawn comes again. This time, the fleet is pulling into Calicut, the beating heart of India's spice trade. You can smell it before you even see it. Pepper sharp in your nose, cinnamon warm, cloves like smoke. The docks swarm with merchants in bright robes, their voices a chaos of bargains and boasts. For a moment, you almost forget you're supposed to be sleepy, because the scene is so vivid. Elephants lumbering nearby, oxen pulling carts stacked high with sacks of pepper, parrots darting overhead like flashes of emerald fire. Zhang He steps ashore, not as a conqueror, but as a diplomat. You imagine the pomp. Officials carrying silk banners, drums echoing across the port, gifts unfurled like theater props, porcelain bowls gleaming in the sunlight, bolts of silk shimmering, and somewhere in a carved wooden crate, exotic creatures stirring. The locals must have been stunned, both impressed and uneasy. Who sends an entire floating city halfway across the world just to say hello? And here's where the unease creeps back in. You know something they don't. This theater won't last forever. Someday the ships will sail out and never return, leaving only rumors in their wake. But right now, under the Indian sun, the treasure fleet seems invincible. You smile at the absurdity of it all. Maybe a sailor sneaks away from duty to buy sweets in the market, only to be dragged back by his furious officer. Maybe a local merchant jokes about how the Chinese sailors haggle worse than his grandmother. Even in the shadow of mystery, people still find ways to laugh, to tease, to live. The wind shifts, tugging at your cloak in this dream, and you can't shake the question, what if this was the peak? What if all this spectacle was a firework that dazzled the world for a moment, only to vanish into smoke, leaving the night sky as dark as before? You close your eyes and let the thought drift. The fleet sails on.
The fleet has now rounded the tip of the Indian subcontinent, and the open waters of the Arabian Sea stretch before you, endless and merciless. You can feel the salt in your hair, the sting of it in your eyes, and the way the sun beats down on the deck like a relentless overseer. The waves are taller now, rolling with a rhythm that's both hypnotic and threatening, a lullaby that might just pull you under if you're not careful. You lean against the railing, fingers gripping the wood as your imagination tries to measure the vastness of the voyage. The sheer scale of the fleet is almost absurd. Ships the size of small villages, with towering decks and hulls carved like fortresses, move together like a slow, living organism. You can hear the thrum of activity, sailors hauling ropes, carpenters hammering to repair timbers, cooks shouting over the clatter of pots. Somewhere, a crewman mutters about a storm on the horizon, his voice blending with the creak of the ship. Historians still argue whether these massive vessels were practical or merely symbolic, built to awe as much as to transport goods and men. And here's your quirky tidbit for the night. One of the treasure fleet's ships reportedly carried a miniature zoo, monkeys, peacocks, and even leopards to present as gifts to foreign rulers. You picture a sailor nervously handing a snarling leopard to a bewildered sultan, while the peacock struts proudly across the deck, oblivious to the chaos around it. In your mind, the scene is both comical and terrifying. The diplomatic aspect of the voyage becomes increasingly clear as the fleet reaches ports along the coast of Arabia and East Africa. Local rulers, accustomed to traders and pirates, are confronted with an entirely different spectacle. A fleet moving not for profit, but for prestige and influence. The Chinese carry silks, porcelain, and exotic spices, but also rituals and protocol, performances meant to impress, intimidate, and bind alliances. Some historians still argue whether these missions were genuine cultural exchanges or carefully orchestrated displays of imperial might. And meanwhile, aboard the ships, life continues in all its messy humanity. Sailors steal moments of laughter between labor, sometimes teasing each other about exotic foods or superstitions. You imagine a young eunuch whispering prayers over his amulet, a cook nervously adjusting a basket of spoiled vegetables, and the crew staring at the night sky, wondering which star will guide them home. The tension between human ambition and natural forces is palpable. Storms begin to test the fleet, sudden squalls that lash the sails and toss smaller vessels like toys. You can almost feel the ship sway beneath your feet, the spray of seawater stinging your face. Some sailors vomit over the rails, others cling desperately to rigging, chanting or praying. Historians still argue whether the fleet was overbuilt for its own protection, or whether its sheer size made it unwieldy in turbulent waters. And yet, amid fear and chaos, moments of wonder persist. Dolphins racing alongside the hull, the aurora of phosphorescent plankton at night, and the constant, comforting rhythm of waves hitting wood remind you that the sea is both enemy and companion. The fleet's journey is a delicate dance of control and surrender, a demonstration of human ingenuity tempered by the uncontrollable forces of nature. By now, you sense the looming shadow of the unknown. While Zheng He and his crews push forward with determination, the stories of missing ships, strange disappearances, and uncharted reefs hang in the air like whispered warnings. The larger questions of the fleet's purpose, longevity, and eventual fate grow heavier in your mind. And as the sun sets, painting the horizon in molten oranges and purples, you can almost hear the ocean whisper, "Not all treasures return."
Night falls like a velvet curtain over the Arabian Sea, and the fleet drifts under a sky scattered with stars. The constellations feel familiar yet distant, as though the heavens themselves are observing this unprecedented voyage. You imagine lying on deck, back pressed against rough planks, the smell of salt and wood filling your nostrils, listening to the gentle slap of waves against the hull. The sailors, exhausted from days of navigating currents and storms, murmur quietly among themselves, some reciting prayers, others telling tales of home. Here's your mainstream fact. Zheng He's voyages weren't solo adventures. They involved hundreds of ships and tens of thousands of men. From admirals to cooks, carpenters to astrologers, the fleet was a microcosm of the empire itself. Historians still argue whether managing such a vast organization across thousands of miles of uncharted waters was truly feasible, or if the human element, discipline, morale, sheer endurance was the fleet's most remarkable feat. And a quirky tidbit. It's said that some ships carried treasure gardens, small patches of soil where flowers, herbs, and even fruit trees were cultivated to keep morale high and offer a touch of home.
You can picture the sailors snatching a ripe peach or inhaling the fragrance of jasmine, a fleeting reminder of earthly comforts amid endless ocean. Diplomacy and spectacle intertwine as the fleet approaches the Swahili coast. Ports like Mogadishu and Malindi become stages for the grand display of imperial power. Exotic gifts are exchanged, silks unfurled, and carefully choreographed ceremonies take place. The local rulers, accustomed to trade and occasional tribute, now face an entire floating city with bells, banners, and strange animals that might as well have been mythical. You can almost hear the gasps, the whispers of disbelief, and the scribbling of meticulous notes by curious scribes. Life aboard, however, remains grounded in daily necessity. Sailors tend to rigging, patch sails, and ration provisions. Even the most minor disruptions, a spoiled barrel of water or a lost crate of rice, can ripple through the fleet like a storm in miniature. The human drama unfolds quietly. Jealousies, camaraderie, fear, and hope all mingle under the same roof of sails and timber. Historians still debate whether the fleet's size ultimately became a logistical burden, a marvel of planning that nevertheless carried seeds of its own vulnerability. And then there's the humor, small as it is. Imagine a parrot repeating a sailor's curses in perfect imitation, or a monkey stealing someone's hat and dangling it from a mast. Amid the vastness and peril of the sea, these absurd moments anchor the men to life, laughter, and sanity. You chuckle along with them in your imagination, a fleeting sense of normalcy in a voyage defined by extremes. Storms continue to test the fleet. Torrential rains and sudden squalls toss even the largest ships as though they were toy models. Sailors cling to ropes and pray, the scent of wet timber and salt filling their lungs. Some vessels lag behind, struggling to stay in formation, while others surge ahead, confident in their masterful construction. Historians still argue whether these storms were mere challenges or early hints of the disappearance that will later cloak the fleet in mystery. Yet through all the chaos, wonder persists. You visualize phosphorescent waves glowing like molten silver, dolphins racing alongside the ships, and the endless rhythm of the sea as a lullaby. There is awe in human ingenuity and humility in recognizing nature's dominion. Every mile covered is a testament to courage, planning, and sheer will, a fleeting triumph that will one day vanish without a trace. As the night deepens, a thought lingers uncomfortably. Not all journeys end with triumph. Some vanish into legend. And for this fleet, that eventual silence is already whispering on the wind just beyond the reach of your dream's ears.
The first glimmer of dawn seeps over the horizon, washing the fleet in pale gold. You imagine the sailors rubbing sleep from their eyes, leaning over the rails, their breath clouding in the cool morning air. The vast expanse of ocean stretches endlessly, a canvas of blues and greens, with each wave a brushstroke that refuses to be tamed. You can almost feel the wooden decks sway under your feet, the rigging creak in gentle protest, and the sails shiver in the light breeze, ready to catch wind and propel the treasure-laden giants forward. Mainstream fact, Zheng He's fleet wasn't just a display of power. It was a carefully coordinated network of logistics, navigation, and communication. The largest treasure ships, known as Bao Chuan, could carry hundreds of tons of cargo, including exotic animals, silks, porcelain, and precious metals. Historians still argue whether the empire's reliance on these ships was sustainable, or if the scale of ambition sowed the seeds of the fleet's eventual disappearance. Now, for a quirky tidbit, one record suggests that some vessels carried mechanical devices, early forms of water clocks and astronomical instruments used to chart the skies and tides. Imagine a sailor nervously winding a tiny contraption while the deck rocks beneath him, trying to balance duty and ingenuity. Perhaps the whole thing feels absurd,
a floating museum of curiosities that travels thousands of miles with only the ocean as a guide. You drift further in your mind, imagining the fleet approaching Sumatra, its harbors bustling with trade. Spices, exotic textiles, and the chatter of merchants create a symphony of smells and sounds. The sailors' senses must have been overwhelmed. The sharp fragrance of clove, the sweetness of nutmeg, the sight of elephants lumbering along the shore, their bells jingling in time with distant drums. Diplomacy, spectacle, and commerce blend seamlessly in this scene. Life on deck continues in the mundane and miraculous alike. Sailors repair sails, chop wood for cooking fires, and steal moments of quiet reflection. You picture a young eunuch sneaking a piece of fruit from a crate, a cook juggling bowls of rice over a swaying deck, and the officers walking along, inspecting everything with a practiced eye. Historians still debate whether the sheer size of the fleet made coordination easier or more chaotic, and you find yourself siding with chaos. The humor persists even in hardship. Perhaps a monkey rides atop a barrel of wine, or a parrot mimics a captain's orders in perfect imitation, much to the crew's amusement. These moments humanize the monumental endeavor, offering levity amid exhaustion. You smile at the thought, the absurdity of animals and humans negotiating life together on a giant wooden city adrift in the ocean. Storm clouds gather on the horizon, painting the sky in deep grays and ominous purples. Sailors adjust sails and secure cargo, their faces set with determination. Waves grow taller, slapping against the hull with insistent force. Historians still argue whether these monsoon storms contributed to the fleet's eventual vanishing, or if other, less tangible factors, political shifts, court intrigues, played a larger role. As the day drifts into evening, you lean against the railing, imagining the fleet gliding through the last rays of sunlight. The sea is both ally and adversary, a reminder that no matter how grand the human plan, nature sets its own limits. And somewhere in the depths, hidden from eyes and maps, the mystery of the treasure fleet begins its long, silent journey toward legend.
The night returns, a soft blanket dotted with distant stars, and the fleet drifts under the gentle luminescence of moonlight. You imagine the sailors, exhausted yet vigilant, moving like shadows across the deck. The scent of salt and wet wood mingles with the occasional whiff of cooking fires and animal pens. Somewhere, a eunuch adjusts a lantern, its light flickering across the ropes and sails, painting fleeting patterns that seem almost magical. You lean against a mast and take it all in, feeling the rhythm of the fleet as if it were a living heartbeat beneath your feet. A mainstream fact for grounding your imagination. Zheng He's voyages stretched over 3 decades, covering thousands of nautical miles and visiting ports across Southeast Asia, South Asia, the Middle East, and East Africa. Historians still argue whether these missions were primarily diplomatic, commercial, or designed as displays of power meant to awe distant rulers. Perhaps the answer lies somewhere in the tension between those purposes, a blend of ambition and strategy that can't be easily categorized. Quirky tidbit: the fleet reportedly carried gifted animals that often caused minor chaos. Peacocks, for example, were known to strut boldly across the decks, occasionally startling sailors into minor accidents or arguments. You chuckle quietly in your mind, picturing a monkey leaping onto a sleeping sailor, both startled and annoyed, while a parrot squawks a seemingly judgmental commentary on the incident. As the ships navigate the coastal waters of what is now Somalia and Kenya, trade and diplomacy blend seamlessly. Local merchants and rulers are fascinated by the size and complexity of the Chinese vessels. The foreign ports teem with activity, sacks of spices, glimmering textiles, and exotic curiosities being unloaded and examined. Sailors carry gifts and messages, navigating not only the physical seas, but also the delicate channels of cross-cultural interaction. Historians still debate the long-term impacts of these exchanges, questioning whether they fostered lasting relationships or were fleeting spectacles.
Life aboard continues to oscillate between routine and adventure. Cooks prepare meals over makeshift stoves, sailors mend sails in the flickering lantern light, and officers supervise every detail with meticulous care. You imagine a crew member balancing a tray of porcelain dishes while navigating the rolling deck, one misstep away from disaster. Moments of absurdity punctuate the otherwise disciplined environment. A runaway monkey chasing after a sailor, a parrot repeating gossip it shouldn't have overheard, or a sailor mistaking an exotic fruit for something entirely inedible. The ocean, however, is never still. Currents shift unexpectedly, waves rise without warning, and storms loom on the horizon. Sailors brace themselves, tightening ropes, securing cargo, and offering whispered prayers to sea deities. Historians still argue whether the sheer size and scale of the treasure fleet made it vulnerable to such natural forces, or if its size was its strength, able to withstand challenges that smaller vessels could not. By midnight, a sense of eerie calm settles over the fleet. The water reflects the moon's silvery glow and the stars glimmer faintly above. You picture the silent officers keeping watch, the crew resting in cramped quarters, and the exotic animals dozing uneasily. The juxtaposition of monumental human achievement and the vast, indifferent sea is almost dizzying. You whisper to yourself, not all who sail these waters will be remembered, but the stories, the glimmers of human audacity, and the lingering mysteries will persist for centuries. And somewhere beneath the waves, hidden from every eye and chart, the seeds of disappearance begin to take hold, unnoticed, waiting for time to reveal them.
Dawn creeps over the horizon once more, washing the ocean in muted shades of orange and lavender. The fleet moves like a slowly pulsing organism, its massive wooden bodies cutting through the waves with disciplined precision. You imagine standing on deck, your fingers tracing the rough-grained rail, listening to the creak of the timbers, the slap of the water, and the distant cries of seabirds. The smell of salt and brine mingles with the faint aroma of burning wood from the galley. The rhythm of life aboard is hypnotic, yet each movement carries a weight of purpose. The smallest error could cascade into disaster. Here's a mainstream fact to anchor you. Zheng He's treasure fleet included some of the largest wooden ships ever built, with some vessels reported to be over 400 feet long. Historians still argue whether these massive constructions were purely functional or designed as symbols of imperial power, meant to awe both enemies and allies. Either way, you feel the sheer magnitude of human ambition pressing against the vastness of the sea. A quirky tidbit, some ships reportedly carried miniature gardens and medicinal herbs grown on board to sustain the crew during long months at sea. You imagine a sailor carefully tending to a tiny patch of green amid the endless blue, balancing the duty to nourish both body and morale with the motion of the rolling deck. Perhaps a small flower blooms unexpectedly, and for a moment, hope seems tangible in a world dominated by salt and wind. As the fleet approaches the Malabar coast in India, trade and diplomacy blend seamlessly. Local rulers, unfamiliar with such an enormous and disciplined armada, watch with a mix of awe and suspicion. Exotic silks and porcelain are exchanged for spices, pearls, and other local treasures. Sailors and diplomats alike navigate a delicate balance, their interactions a dance between curiosity, strategy, and the inherent human desire to impress. Historians still debate whether these exchanges established long-term relationships or were merely fleeting spectacles, moments that dazzled but quickly faded. Life aboard continues with its oscillation between mundanity and marvel. Sailors repair sails, distribute rations, and sneak quiet moments to share a laugh or a whispered story. Imagine a eunuch carefully cataloging a crate of exotic items, while a parrot squawks in the background, imitating commands in ways that both amuse and frustrate the crew. Moments like these offer levity amid the enormous responsibility of managing tens of thousands of people across uncharted waters. The ocean's temperament is unpredictable. Currents shift, storms brew, and waves rise without warning.
Sailors brace, tighten ropes, and offer whispered prayers. Historians still argue whether the fleet's immense scale was a strength that allowed it to weather such challenges, or if it introduced vulnerabilities that smaller, more agile vessels could have avoided. You imagine both perspectives, awe at the engineering feat and anxiety over its potential fragility. As evening falls, the ocean glows in the soft hues of twilight. Lanterns sway gently aboard the ships, casting dancing shadows over the deck. You envision officers pacing, crew members resting, and exotic animals stirring uneasily. The vastness of human ingenuity, juxtaposed with the immensity of the sea, is humbling. Somewhere, in the distance and perhaps beneath the waves, the mystery of the treasure fleet quietly begins its long journey toward legend, carrying with it stories, ambitions, and unanswered questions that will echo for centuries.
The sea wakes slowly under a muted sunrise, casting a soft golden glow over the fleet. You stand on deck, feeling the wooden planks shift beneath your feet, the sails trembling in the early morning wind. The air carries the faint scent of salt and wet rope, mingled with the aroma of simmering rice and dried fish from the galley. You listen carefully, noting the distant cries of gulls and the rhythmic slap of waves against the hulls, a heartbeat of the ocean itself. There is a hypnotic quality to it all, a quiet that is only occasionally punctuated by the creak of timbers or the shuffle of a sailor's boots. Cheng He's voyages were monumental, not only in scale, but in ambition. Some estimates suggest the fleet included over 300 ships and carried more than 27,000 men, from soldiers and navigators to scholars and eunuchs. Historians still argue whether this colossal human and material investment was sustainable or if it was destined to strain the empire's resources over time. You imagine the tension in the imperial court as they watched fleets depart and return, or, in some cases, fail to return. Some records indicate that sailors carried ceremonial umbrellas and musical instruments to maintain morale and display imperial grandeur during port visits. You picture a small ensemble of musicians on the deck, carefully avoiding buckets and ropes, playing tunes meant to impress foreign dignitaries while also soothing their own nerves. Perhaps the music mingles with the cries of animals, creating an accidental symphony of civilization amidst the raw chaos of the sea. The fleet approaches the ports of Southeast Asia, where the water is warmer and the smells of local markets drift across the docks. You imagine merchants and locals lining the shore, craning their necks to observe these floating palaces of wood, silk, and gold. Exotic animals, peacocks, lions, even giraffes, are paraded for the locals' astonishment. Each creature carefully tended and transported across thousands of miles. Historians still debate whether these displays were genuine acts of diplomacy or more theatrical statements of imperial might, a spectacle meant to awe and unsettle in equal measure. Life aboard continues, a delicate rhythm balancing survival and spectacle. Sailors distribute rations, repair sails, and navigate the ever-changing currents, while officers meticulously maintain logs of positions, provisions, and encounters. You imagine a crew member adjusting the rigging with one hand while scribbling notes with the other, sweat dripping from his brow despite the cool morning breeze. The human element, the fatigue, humor, fear, and ingenuity is as much a part of the voyage as the wooden hulls and silk sails. Humor persists even amid the tension. A mischievous monkey steals a sailor's hat, dangling it from a mast, while the crew laughs and scolds in equal measure. A parrot repeats the captain's orders in a distorted imitation that elicits stifled chuckles. Even as storms loom on the horizon, these small absurdities provide a psychological lifeline,
grounding men who are otherwise at the mercy of the ocean. The ocean itself is a character in this unfolding drama. Currents shift unexpectedly, waves rise and fall, and storms appear on the horizon like dark omens. Sailors tighten ropes, brace for impact, and whisper prayers to sea deities. Historians still argue whether natural forces were the principal cause of the fleet's eventual disappearance, or if political and logistical factors played a larger role. You feel the duality of awe and dread as you picture massive waves tossing ships like toys, yet the human ingenuity and discipline keeping the fleet intact for months at a time. As the day progresses, you envision the intricate dance of diplomacy. Local rulers are fascinated, sometimes intimidated, by the presence of these enormous ships. Gift exchanges are meticulously choreographed. Letters are presented with careful protocol, and ceremonial bows are executed with precision. Sailors and diplomats alike navigate not only the seas, but the complexities of cultural interaction, learning foreign customs while subtly asserting the grandeur of the Ming Empire. A fringe tidbit surfaces. There are accounts of sailors using exotic spices to calm seasickness, and even attempting rudimentary medicinal treatments for scurvy and other illnesses. Imagine a sailor gnawing on dried ginger while another applies a concoction of herbs to a crew member's sores. Each remedy a small act of ingenuity in the otherwise relentless rhythm of maritime life. The combination of ritual, superstition, and practical knowledge forms a tapestry of human resilience that stretches across the fleet. As night falls, lanterns flicker along the decks, casting elongated shadows across the waves. Officers pace deliberately, sailors settle into hammocks or makeshift bunks, and exotic animals shift uneasily, sensing the strange rhythm of life at sea. The moon rises, silvering the water and revealing the vastness of the journey yet to come. Historians still debate whether the fleet's massive size and logistical complexity were ultimately an asset or a liability, a question you contemplate as you picture the simultaneous grandeur and fragility of this floating empire. You drift further in your imagination, observing a solitary eunuch seated near the helm, carefully documenting the fleet's progress. His quill scratches quietly against parchment as he monitors the celestial navigation charts. Somewhere nearby, a small child or young apprentice might be learning the ropes, literally and figuratively, preparing for a life spent at sea. This mix of education, labor, and ceremony creates a microcosm of society afloat, a living testament to ambition, curiosity, and human adaptability. Moments of levity continue to appear, grounding the crew and the imagination alike. A parrot imitates a trumpet's call, prompting laughter. A monkey clambers across the ropes, narrowly avoiding disaster. A sailor slips in the galley, sending a tray of rice flying, only to be met with good-natured mockery from his companions. These micro-dramas play out alongside monumental events, reminding you that life at sea is never purely heroic or tragic, but a mixture of both, punctuated with absurdity. As the fleet sails deeper into the Indian Ocean, trade winds provide momentum, pushing the wooden giants forward with a steady, hypnotic rhythm. The smell of salt intensifies, mingling with the scent of exotic animals and prepared meals. You imagine the horizon stretching endlessly, a visual metaphor for both opportunity and uncertainty. Every mile traveled is a small victory, a testament to human endurance against forces far larger than themselves. Historians still argue whether such voyages were sustainable over decades, or if they were ultimately a fleeting display of power that the empire could not maintain. By nightfall, the fleet glimmers under starlight, a chain of lanterns floating on the Black Sea. You picture officers exchanging reports, sailors tending to minor repairs, and exotic animals curling into corners, uneasy yet adaptable. The juxtaposition of human ambition and natural enormity creates a sense of awe that is almost tactile. Somewhere far beneath the waves, the future disappearance of the fleet begins its silent prelude, hidden from every eye, yet inevitable.
The sea wakes slowly under a muted sunrise, casting a soft golden glow over the fleet. You stand on deck, feeling the wooden planks shift beneath your feet, the sails trembling in the early morning wind. The air carries the faint scent of salt and wet rope, mingled with the aroma of simmering rice and dried fish from the galley. You listen carefully, noting the distant cries of gulls and the rhythmic slap of waves against the hulls, a heartbeat of the ocean itself. There is a hypnotic quality to it all, a quiet that is only occasionally punctuated by the creak of timbers or the shuffle of a sailor's boots. Cheng He's voyages were monumental, not only in scale, but in ambition. Some estimates suggest the fleet included over 300 ships and carried more than 27,000 men, from soldiers and navigators to scholars and eunuchs. Historians still argue whether this colossal human and material investment was sustainable or if it was destined to strain the empire's resources over time. You imagine the tension in the imperial court as they watched fleets depart and return, or, in some cases, fail to return. Some records indicate that sailors carried ceremonial umbrellas and musical instruments to maintain morale and display imperial grandeur during port visits. You picture a small ensemble of musicians on the deck, carefully avoiding buckets and ropes, playing tunes meant to impress foreign dignitaries while also soothing their own nerves. Perhaps the music mingles with the cries of animals, creating an accidental symphony of civilization amidst the raw chaos of the sea. The fleet approaches the ports of Southeast Asia, where the water is warmer and the smells of local markets drift across the docks. You imagine merchants and locals lining the shore, craning their necks to observe these floating palaces of wood, silk, and gold. Exotic animals, peacocks, lions, even giraffes, are paraded for the locals' astonishment. Each creature carefully tended and transported across thousands of miles. Historians still debate whether these displays were genuine acts of diplomacy or more theatrical statements of imperial might, a spectacle meant to awe and unsettle in equal measure. Life aboard continues, a delicate rhythm balancing survival and spectacle. Sailors distribute rations, repair sails, and navigate the ever-changing currents, while officers meticulously maintain logs of positions, provisions, and encounters. You imagine a crew member adjusting the rigging with one hand while scribbling notes with the other, sweat dripping from his brow despite the cool morning breeze. The human element, the fatigue, humor, fear, and ingenuity is as much a part of the voyage as the wooden hulls and silk sails. Humor persists even amid the tension. A mischievous monkey steals a sailor's hat, dangling it from a mast, while the crew laughs and scolds in equal measure. A parrot repeats the captain's orders in a distorted imitation that elicits stifled chuckles. Even as storms loom on the horizon, these small absurdities provide a psychological lifeline, grounding men who are otherwise at the mercy of the ocean. The ocean itself is a character in this unfolding drama. Currents shift unexpectedly, waves rise and fall, and storms appear on the horizon like dark omens. Sailors tighten ropes, brace for impact,
and whisper prayers to sea deities. Historians still argue whether natural forces were the principal cause of the fleet's eventual disappearance, or if political and logistical factors played a larger role. You feel the duality of awe and dread as you picture massive waves tossing ships like toys, yet the human ingenuity and discipline keeping the fleet intact for months at a time. As the day progresses, you envision the intricate dance of diplomacy. Local rulers are fascinated, sometimes intimidated, by the presence of these enormous ships. Gift exchanges are meticulously choreographed. Letters are presented with careful protocol, and ceremonial bows are executed with precision. Sailors and diplomats alike navigate not only the seas, but the complexities of cultural interaction, learning foreign customs while subtly asserting the grandeur of the Ming Empire. A fringe tidbit surfaces. There are accounts of sailors using exotic spices to calm seasickness, and even attempting rudimentary medicinal treatments for scurvy and other illnesses. Imagine a sailor gnawing on dried ginger while another applies a concoction of herbs to a crew member's sores. Each remedy a small act of ingenuity in the otherwise relentless rhythm of maritime life. The combination of ritual, superstition, and practical knowledge forms a tapestry of human resilience that stretches across the fleet. As night falls, lanterns flicker along the decks, casting elongated shadows across the waves. Officers pace deliberately, sailors settle into hammocks or makeshift bunks, and exotic animals shift uneasily, sensing the strange rhythm of life at sea. The moon rises, silvering the water and revealing the vastness of the journey yet to come. Historians still debate whether the fleet's massive size and logistical complexity were ultimately an asset or a liability. A question you contemplate as you picture the simultaneous grandeur and fragility of this floating empire. You drift further in your imagination, observing a solitary eunuch seated near the helm, carefully documenting the fleet's progress. His quill scratches quietly against parchment as he monitors the celestial navigation charts. Somewhere nearby, a small child or young apprentice might be learning the ropes, literally and figuratively, preparing for a life spent at sea. This mix of education, labor, and ceremony creates a microcosm of society afloat, a living testament to ambition, curiosity, and human adaptability. Moments of levity continue to appear, grounding the crew and the imagination alike. A parrot imitates a trumpet's call, prompting laughter. A monkey clambers across the ropes, narrowly avoiding disaster. A sailor slips in the galley, sending a tray of rice flying, only to be met with good-natured mockery from his companions. These micro-dramas play out alongside monumental events, reminding you that life at sea is never purely heroic or tragic, but a mixture of both, punctuated with absurdity. As the fleet sails deeper into the Indian Ocean, trade winds provide momentum, pushing the wooden giants forward with a steady, hypnotic rhythm. The smell of salt intensifies, mingling with the scent of exotic animals and prepared meals. You imagine the horizon stretching endlessly, a visual metaphor for both opportunity and uncertainty. Every mile traveled is a small victory, a testament to human endurance against forces far larger than themselves. Historians still argue whether such voyages were sustainable over decades, or if they were ultimately a fleeting display of power that the empire could not maintain. By nightfall, the fleet glimmers under starlight, a chain of lanterns floating on the Black Sea. You picture officers exchanging reports, sailors tending to minor repairs, and exotic animals curling into corners, uneasy yet adaptable.
The juxtaposition of human ambition and natural enormity creates a sense of awe that is almost tactile. Somewhere far beneath the waves, the future disappearance of the fleet begins its silent prelude, hidden from every eye, yet inevitable.
Morning arrives slowly, painting the horizon in muted shades of pink and gold. You step onto the deck, feeling the gentle sway beneath your feet as the fleet glides forward. The scent of salt water mingles with smoke from cooking fires, and somewhere nearby, an exotic animal, perhaps a peacock or a monkey, stirs with curiosity and impatience. The crew moves with quiet efficiency, distributing rations, checking sails, and attending to the needs of the animals and passengers. Even in this disciplined routine, there is an underlying tension. The ocean is unpredictable, and the vast distance from home magnifies every small error or misjudgment. Here's a mainstream fact to anchor your imagination. Zheng He's fleet routinely carried hundreds of tons of silk, porcelain, spices, and precious metals, all carefully cataloged and stored to avoid damage during long voyages. Historians still argue whether these massive hauls were primarily intended for trade, diplomacy, or as displays of imperial opulence designed to awe foreign courts. Standing here, you feel the weight of both cargo and expectation pressing against the wooden decks, a tangible measure of human ambition. A quirky tidbit: some reports suggest that crew members carried personal charms, lucky coins, and small religious tokens to ward off sea monsters or bad luck. You can't help but picture a sailor nervously clutching a tiny jade figurine while a wave crashes over the side, whispering silent prayers for safety. The absurdity of faith mingled with the reality of survival is oddly comforting, reminding you that people have always sought small ways to control the uncontrollable. As the fleet approaches the Malabar coast, local markets bustle with curiosity and commerce. Merchants examine porcelain bowls and embroidered silks, their eyes widening at intricate craftsmanship that seems to defy their imagination. Sailors present gifts with precision, executing ceremonial bows and presenting letters in ornate boxes. Historians still debate whether these diplomatic gestures were meant to create lasting alliances or were simply theatrical displays designed to project power without long-term political strategy. Life aboard remains a mix of routine, vigilance, and humor. Sailors haul ropes, repair sails, and distribute rations, while officers oversee navigation and record the fleet's progress. You imagine a young apprentice learning to balance on the deck, observing the subtle art of reading wind and wave, while an experienced sailor offers guidance with a knowing grin. The human drama aboard is as compelling as the logistical challenge, a delicate balance of discipline, creativity, and resilience. Humor persists amidst the challenges. A parrot squawks an order previously given by an officer, eliciting stifled laughter. A monkey grabs a sailor's hat, prompting a minor chase across the deck. These small distractions relieve tension, reminding everyone that life is unpredictable and that laughter is sometimes the best coping mechanism in an environment dominated by vast, indifferent water. The ocean itself is a formidable presence. Currents shift without warning, waves rise and fall, and storms loom as dark patches on the horizon. Sailors brace themselves, tighten ropes, and whisper prayers to both Buddhist and local sea deities. Historians still argue whether the fleet's enormous size provided resilience against these natural challenges, or whether it introduced vulnerabilities that smaller, nimbler vessels could have avoided. You feel the duality of awe and dread, imagining both the engineering marvel and the precariousness of its existence. As day turns to dusk, lanterns flicker aboard the fleet, casting dancing shadows across the rolling decks. Officers pace methodically, sailors rest or attend to minor repairs, and exotic animals shift uneasily in their pens. The juxtaposition of monumental human ambition and the immensity of the natural world is humbling. Somewhere beneath the waves, hidden from all eyes, the seeds of the fleet's eventual disappearance begin to take root, silent and inexorable. A French fact adds texture to your imagination. Some sailors reportedly use tiny terrariums of plants to simulate home environments, providing both comfort and a small scientific curiosity. Imagine tending to a miniature bamboo grove while the ocean rolls endlessly around you. A reminder that even in isolation, humans seek connection with the familiar and the beautiful. Night settles fully over the fleet, and the world contracts into the soft glow of lanterns and starlight. You picture crew members murmuring quiet prayers, animals shifting in uneasy slumber, and officers maintaining a vigilant eye on the horizon. Every sound, the creak of wood, the slap of water, the occasional call of a nightbird, is amplified in the quiet, reinforcing both the grandeur and the fragility of this floating empire. Historians still debate the interplay of ambition, logistics, and human resilience that sustain these voyages. Standing here, you sense that both the tangible and the intangible forces, the human and the natural, are inextricably intertwined, guiding the fleet toward destiny, mystery, and legend.
The morning sun rises slowly, casting long shadows across the deck and glinting off polished timbers and glimmering porcelain crates. You step carefully over coiled ropes, feeling the subtle sway of the ship beneath your feet. The air carries the familiar tang of salt, mixed with the faint aroma of herbs, incense, and the unavoidably pungent odors of livestock stowed in nearby pens. Somewhere in the distance, a parrot calls out, mimicking the cadence of a sailor's voice, and a monkey leaps nimbly from one beam to another, narrowly avoiding disaster. The rhythm of life aboard the fleet has become almost hypnotic, part routine, part spectacle, and part careful orchestration of human ingenuity against the whims of the ocean. Mainstream fact, Zhong He's voyages reached as far as the east coast of Africa, touching ports that few Chinese had ever seen, let alone traded with. Historians still argue whether these missions were primarily diplomatic, commercial, or military in intent. Standing on deck, you can feel the weight of centuries pressing down, a blend of awe and trepidation at the scope of ambition, both imperial and human. A quirky tidbit, some of the fleet's ships reportedly carried miniature zoos, complete with lions, leopards, and exotic birds. Imagine navigating the treacherous waves while trying to prevent a tiger from escaping its pen or a monkey from stealing precious silks. The absurdity of these domestic concerns amidst global ambition offers a strange comfort, reminding you that even monumental projects are built on the small, human-scale details. The fleet's approach to new ports is a performance as much as a logistical maneuver. Sailors practice the precise choreography of docking, unloading cargo, and presenting gifts. Local rulers and merchants watch with a mix of curiosity, admiration, and suspicion. Exotic goods, silk, porcelain, and spices were offered in carefully curated quantities to demonstrate wealth and sophistication. Historians still debate whether these exchanges forged long-lasting diplomatic ties or simply served as ephemeral spectacles intended to awe without enduring consequence. Life aboard is a careful balance between discipline, labor, and the human need for amusement. Sailors mend sails, haul cargo, and navigate treacherous waters, while officers oversee logistics, record positions, and maintain order. You picture a young apprentice observing the minutiae of shipboard life, learning how to read wind and wave, how to balance skill and patience, and how to participate in a floating society that is both extraordinary and fragile. Humor persists as a coping mechanism. A sailor's hat is stolen by a mischievous monkey, prompting laughter and mild chaos. A parrot repeats a command with unintelligible accuracy, eliciting stifled chuckles. Even as storms loom on the horizon, these small bursts of levity provide psychological sustenance, reinforcing human resilience against the vast, indifferent expanse of the ocean. The ocean itself remains an unpredictable character. Currents shift without warning, waves rise and fall, and distant storm clouds hint at potential peril. Sailors tighten ropes, adjust sails, and whisper prayers to both Buddhists and local deities. Historians still argue whether the fleet's immense scale was an advantage or a liability in the face of these natural forces. You feel the duality of engineering marvel and human fragility
pressing against your imagination. As evening settles, lanterns glow softly along the decks, casting dancing shadows on the rolling waves. Officers pace methodically, sailors tend to their duties, and exotic animals shift uneasily in their pens. The juxtaposition of monumental human achievement and the vast, indifferent sea is both humbling and mesmerizing. Somewhere beneath the surface, the fleet's eventual disappearance begins to take shape, a silent prelude to centuries of speculation, legend, and unanswered questions. A fringe tidbit you can't ignore: crew members sometimes carried tiny plants or bonsai-like gardens to provide a sense of home in continuity, a small reminder of familiar landscapes amidst the endless expanse of the ocean. The juxtaposition of meticulous care for these miniature worlds against the chaos of thousands of men, animals, and tons of cargo highlights the duality of human enterprise: order within chaos, beauty within danger. Night deepens, and the world contracts to the soft glow of lanterns and starlight. Crew members murmur prayers, animals settle into uneasy slumber, and officers maintain a vigilant watch. Every sound, the creak of wood, the slap of waves, the occasional call of nightbirds, is amplified in the quiet, reinforcing both the majesty and vulnerability of this floating empire. Historians continue to debate whether the treasure fleet's ultimate fate was shaped more by human ambition, natural forces, or the invisible hand of chance. Standing here, you sense the intertwining of these forces, guiding the fleet towards its mysterious destiny.
Dawn breaks with muted gold spilling across the endless horizon, and you find yourself walking along the deck, letting the creaking timbers beneath your feet set a gentle rhythm to your thoughts. The fleet stretches in long lines, sails puffed like proud chests, each ship a floating city of commerce, diplomacy, and human endurance. Somewhere off to starboard, a young sailor struggles to secure a loose rope, while a monkey teeters dangerously on the edge of a crate filled with delicate porcelain. The absurdity of it all makes you smile, even as the weight of history presses quietly against the imagination. A mainstream historical fact: Zheng He's fleet consisted of hundreds of ships and tens of thousands of sailors, soldiers, artisans, and eunuchs, a scale unmatched in the early 15th century. Historians still argue whether the purpose of this unprecedented mobilization was genuinely about trade and diplomacy, or whether it was largely a display of power designed to cement Yongle's authority across Asia. You feel both awe and mild incredulity at the sheer ambition, imagining how every knot of rope, every barrel of rice, every exotic animal had to be meticulously accounted for. Quirky tidbit: some records hint that the fleet included treasure ships so large they could carry multiple smaller boats inside them, essentially serving as floating garages for the 15th century. The image of a miniature armada nested inside an even larger vessel is strangely delightful, a testament to human ingenuity and perhaps a touch of eccentricity in logistics. As the fleet sails southward, the rhythm of life aboard becomes hypnotic. Sailors haul, mend, and scrub, officers record and supervise, and exotic animals provide both amusement and mild chaos. You picture the daily routines: an apprentice learning to read the stars, a cook nervously stirring a massive pot of rice while keeping an eye on the waves, a carpenter repairing a deckboard with precision that borders on artistry. Historians still debate whether this combination of rigid structure and improvisation was what allowed the fleet to traverse such dangerous waters successfully, or if sheer luck played a more significant role than anyone admits. Humor punctuates the long days. A parrot mimics the captain's orders perfectly, causing a sailor to pause mid-action and laugh. A monkey, undeterred by authority, snatches a loaf of bread, prompting a frantic but comical chase. These small moments of levity anchor the human experience aboard a vessel that could otherwise feel overwhelmingly monumental. You realize that the crew's collective resilience was as much psychological as physical. Laughter, after all, is a survival mechanism. The ocean itself asserts its presence with subtle reminders. Currents tug at the hull, waves lap rhythmically, and distant storm clouds promise challenges ahead.
Sailors adjust sails, tighten ropes, and whisper prayers to both Buddhist deities and local spirits, blending practicality with superstition. Historians continue to argue whether the fleet's enormous scale provided safety through sheer numbers or if it made it more vulnerable to the capriciousness of nature. Standing here in your imagination, you can almost feel the tension between ambition and humility, between human design and the ungovernable sea. Evening descends gradually, lanterns glowing warmly on the decks, casting shadows that sway with the rolling motion of the ships. Officers move methodically, ensuring everything is in order, while sailors tend to final tasks and animals settle into their temporary homes. The interplay of monumental planning, human activity, and the vast, indifferent sea creates a strange and beautiful rhythm. Somewhere deep within, you sense that the seeds of the fleet's eventual disappearance are quietly sprouting, invisible yet inexorable. A fringe fact: sailors sometimes carried miniature personal altars or small plant gardens, providing comfort and continuity amidst the chaos of the open ocean. Caring for these delicate, contained worlds amidst the immense, unpredictable expanse of the fleet is both grounding and oddly poetic, a metaphor for human persistence, ingenuity, and the constant negotiation between order and unpredictability. As night envelops the fleet, the sounds of creaking wood, lapping waves, and occasional animal calls meld into a subtle symphony. The human pulse, the whispered prayers, the quiet laughter, the diligent work, resonates alongside the ocean's steady rhythm. Historians still debate how much of the fleet's voyages were determined by careful planning versus the invisible hand of fortune, but standing here in your imagination, you feel that both forces were inextricably intertwined, carrying the fleet toward the unknown with a sense of grandeur, peril, and inevitable mystery.
The morning light stretches lazily across the horizon, bathing the fleet in muted gold and soft shadows. You wander along the deck, feeling the gentle sway of the ships beneath your feet, each creak of timber a subtle reminder of the delicate balance that holds these enormous vessels together. Somewhere in the distance, a parrot squawks a mangled version of the captain's orders, while a monkey nimbly hops between crates of porcelain and silk, narrowly avoiding disaster. The rhythm of life aboard the fleet is hypnotic, a mix of meticulous labor, quiet observation, and the occasional burst of absurdity that keeps everyone, sailors, officers, and exotic animals alike, alive, alert, and sane. Here's a mainstream historical fact to anchor your imagination. Zheng He's fleet, at its peak, included hundreds of ships carrying tens of thousands of people, all coordinated with an unprecedented level of precision. Historians still argue whether the primary goal of these voyages was diplomacy, trade, or imperial spectacle. You feel the enormity of the task pressing against your senses, realizing that every barrel of rice, every crate of silk, every exotic animal required both careful planning and near-constant human oversight. A quirky tidbit: some of the ships reportedly carried miniature zoo decks with monkeys, leopards, and even camels, creating a floating microcosm of biodiversity. Imagine managing a leopard that's curious about a crate of porcelain, or a monkey that thinks it owns the deck. These small, chaotic elements humanize the otherwise monumental enterprise. The absurdity of tending to such exotic companions alongside tens of thousands of people at sea brings an almost cinematic quality to your imagination. The fleet's approach to foreign ports is a calculated performance. Sailors and officers execute precise maneuvers, presenting gifts to local rulers and merchants with careful ceremony. Silk, porcelain, and spices are offered to demonstrate wealth and sophistication. Historians still debate whether these displays forged lasting diplomatic ties or were temporary spectacles designed to impress without long-term strategy. You watch in your mind's eye as the local markets swell with curiosity and astonishment, merchants gaping at silks that seem impossibly delicate, bowls that seem impossibly perfect. Life aboard balances routine and improvisation. Sailors mend sails, distribute rations, and manage cargo, while officers record positions, oversee navigation, and maintain discipline. You picture apprentices learning the delicate art of celestial navigation, cooks stirring massive pots of rice while avoiding slipping on wet decks, and carpenters repairing timbers with precision bordering on obsession. Historians still debate whether this combination of rigid structure and creative adaptation allowed the fleet to traverse treacherous waters, or if sheer luck played a larger role than admitted. Humor persists, even amid the vast responsibilities. A monkey steals a loaf of bread, a parrot repeats commands with uncanny accuracy, and crew members stifle laughter to maintain decorum. These small bursts of levity are vital, reminders that the psychological endurance of the fleet is as crucial as its physical resilience. You sense the camaraderie growing quietly amidst shared trials and the constant negotiation with the capricious sea. The ocean remains a character in its own right. Currents tug, waves rise and fall, and distant storm clouds hint at potential disaster. Sailors adjust sails, tighten ropes, and whisper prayers to both Buddhist deities and local sea gods. Historians still argue whether the fleet's immense size offered protection or increased vulnerability. You feel the tension between human ambition and natural forces, imagining both engineering marvel and fragile human hope swaying in the balance. Evening descends gradually, and lanterns flicker along the deck, casting soft shadows on swaying timbers. Officers supervise, sailors tend to chores, and exotic animals settle into pens, creating a tableau of discipline and quiet chaos. Somewhere in the depths of this orchestrated endeavor, the fleet's eventual disappearance begins to unfold silently, leaving only speculation, legend, and unanswered questions for centuries to follow. A fringe fact: some sailors carried tiny personal altars or miniature gardens, cultivating a sense of home and continuity amidst the vast, unpredictable ocean. The care and attention given to these small, contained worlds is both grounding and poetic, reflecting human resilience, ingenuity, and the search for beauty amidst uncertainty. Night deepens, folding the fleet into a cocoon of sound, creaking wood, slapping waves, distant animal calls, and murmured prayers. The human pulse, laughter, whispered instructions, diligent work, resonates alongside the ocean's steady rhythm. Historians continue to debate how much of the fleet's fate was shaped by planning versus the hand of fortune. But in your imagination, both forces intertwine, propelling the fleet into the unknown, a story of ambition, mystery, and quiet, enduring human hope.
The sun has climbed higher now, its warm rays stretching across the undulating waves, making the surface of the ocean shimmer like liquid gold. You walk along the deck, feeling the swell of the ship beneath your feet, a gentle, insistent reminder that despite all human planning, the sea has the final say. Sailors move methodically, tying down cargo, checking knots, and casting wary glances toward the horizon, where clouds gather in quiet menace. You notice the monkeys and parrots shifting their positions, curious yet cautious, and it strikes you just how alive this floating microcosm of China truly is. A mainstream historical fact anchors your imagination. Zhang He's voyages were remarkable not just for the fleet's size, hundreds of ships, tens of thousands of people, but for the advanced navigational tools they carried, including sophisticated compasses and star charts that enabled sailors to traverse the vast Indian Ocean with surprising accuracy. Historians still argue whether these tools alone would have sufficed without the rigorous training of the crews and the hierarchical discipline imposed by officers and eunuchs, or if luck played a role equal to skill in every crossing. Quirky tidbit: some chroniclers reported that crew members had a practice of carrying good luck charms, fashioned from jade, bone, and small talismans, pinned to their clothing or tucked into the rigging. These charms were said to ward off storms, sea monsters, and even misfortune in diplomacy. You imagine a sailor carefully adjusting his amulet while hauling a rope in the heat of midday, eyes squinting against the sun, hoping the small object truly bends fate in his favor. The fleet moves as if it has a heartbeat of its own, each ship pulsating with activity, yet unified in direction. You watch a small contingent of mariners testing the rigging, their calls echoing in a rhythm that borders on song. A cook tends a massive cauldron of rice, while simultaneously keeping an eye on a group of inquisitive monkeys that seem determined to taste everything in sight. Historians still debate whether the fleet's human ecosystem, strict hierarchy mixed with moments of improvisational freedom, was essential for survival, or whether sheer discipline alone would have sufficed to hold such an enormous force together. By midday, the heat is relentless. The sun bakes the decks, but the sea breeze offers intermittent relief, carrying the mixed scents of salt, timber, exotic spices, and animal musk. You lean against the railing, imagining the distant lands the fleet aims to reach: Malacca with its busy spice markets, the coasts of India with their jewel-laden ports, and the bustling harbors of East Africa that must have seemed otherworldly to sailors accustomed to the Chinese coastline. The anticipation of foreign lands adds a quiet excitement, though the vastness of the ocean also imposes a creeping sense of vulnerability. Humor and absurdity persist, vital for the morale of all aboard. A monkey makes off with the sailor's hat, and the ensuing chase becomes a spectacle that momentarily distracts from the monotony and tension of navigation. A parrot repeats the captain's loudest commands, causing several young sailors to stumble mid-task, and laughter ripples quietly across the decks. You realize that these seemingly small moments of levity are essential, a buffer against the psychological weight of weeks and months spent at sea, a reminder that the human spirit can endure even in the most immense and intimidating circumstances. The afternoon drifts into a subtle rhythm, marked by the flapping of sails, the occasional squawk of a parrot, and the distant cry of seabirds scouting for fish. You picture the astronomers on board consulting charts and noting celestial positions, their job both delicate and profoundly important, guiding the fleet with precision through waters that could otherwise swallow it without notice. Historians still argue whether the reliance on celestial navigation or the fleet's sheer size offered the greater safety net. But for those standing on deck, the focus is immediate: the next knot, the next sail, the next wave. As evening approaches, the light softens, and shadows stretch along the decks, elongating the shapes of sailors and animals alike. Lanterns are lit gradually, casting golden pools of warmth over timber and rope. Officers check manifests, record positions, and prepare for night watches. Sailors wind down their day's chores, feed the animals, and whisper prayers of stories to themselves in the cooling air. The deck takes on a serene, yet subtly charged energy, a mixture of accomplishment and quiet anticipation for what tomorrow might bring. A fringe tidbit, some accounts suggest that sailors sometimes planted small herbs and flowers in wooden crates, nurturing tiny gardens amidst the chaos of life at sea. These gardens were less about sustenance and more about mental solace, a way to connect with land and home even as the ocean stretched endlessly around them. You imagine bending over one tiny plant, tending it with delicate care, a moment of meditation amidst the organized chaos, a miniature assertion of human persistence against the vastness of nature. Night finally descends, and the fleet settles into a lull. The creak of wood, the slap of waves against hulls, the rustle of animals, and the whispered instructions of night watch combine into a lullaby of human endeavor and oceanic continuity. Historians still debate whether the fleet's enormous scale offered protection or vulnerability in storms and pirate encounters, but standing here in your imagination, the debate is secondary. What matters is the rhythm, the shared heartbeat of thousands of people and animals, the machinery of an empire at sea, and the quiet, patient majesty of the ocean itself.
The first stars appear as the sun slips below the horizon, scattering pale light across the swells. You walk along the deck, the wood warm from the day's sun, and notice how the shadows play across barrels, crates, and the occasional curious animal poking its head from a pen. The air is cooler now, tinged with salt and a faint trace of cooking fires, a comforting reminder that even amidst the vastness of the ocean, life continues in small, tangible ways. Sailors settle into evening routines,
checking lanterns, securing cargo, whispering prayers, or quietly sharing stories. The gentle sway of the ships lulls some into light sleep on deck, blankets thrown over their shoulders, the sound of waves a natural lullaby. Mainstream historical fact: Chang Ha's treasure fleet often traveled with hundreds of vessels and thousands of crew members, a logistical feat unparalleled at the time. Supplies were meticulously planned, from staple foods like rice and beans to luxury items such as silk, porcelain, and exotic spices. Historians still debate how the fleet maintained coordination and morale over months at sea, considering both the sheer scale of the operation and the psychological strain on those aboard. A quirky tidbit: some sailors were said to carry miniature puppets or figurines to entertain themselves and ward off superstition. Picture a sailor in the dim light of the evening whispering dialogue to a tiny carved figure as waves rock him gently, a private theater amidst the enormity of the fleet. These small acts of levity were as crucial to survival as proper navigation or careful rationing. You glance at the horizon, where a faint shimmer suggests distant land, though it could be mirage. The ocean stretches endlessly in every direction, a mirror of the human mind, both vast and unknowable. The astronomers consult their charts, noting positions of stars and planets, guiding the fleet with precision. Historians still argue whether the fleet's advanced navigational methods were sufficient to explain their successful voyages, or if sheer luck played a more substantial role. Life aboard balances discipline and improvisation. Sailors mend sails, manage cargo, tend to animals, and perform rituals to appease both Buddhist and local sea deities. Officers meticulously record positions and observations while ensuring that the enormous vessel remains on course. You imagine the subtle hierarchies at play: eunuchs managing political agendas, captains asserting authority, and ordinary sailors quietly negotiating daily survival and camaraderie. Even amid routine, absurdity surfaces. Monkeys swipe bits of food, parrots mimic commands, and the occasional sailor gets caught in a harmless mishap, prompting quiet laughter that threads through the fleet like invisible string, binding its human and animal passengers together. These moments highlight the resilience of those aboard, their ability to find humor and maintain mental fortitude, essential when facing the endless unpredictability of the ocean. As night deepens, lanterns flicker, casting golden pools of light across the swaying deck. Exotic animals settle into pens, crew members take turns on night watch, and the gentle rhythm of waves against the hull becomes a constant soothing presence. You feel the weight of human ambition and fragility intertwined, a massive fleet, meticulously built, traversing an unforgiving environment, relying on both skill and hope. Historians debate whether the sheer magnitude of the fleet offered protection or risk, but standing on deck, the answer feels less important than the quiet pulse of life in motion. A fringe fact: some crew members practice nighttime storytelling or whispered lullabies to calm both animals and humans alike. You can almost hear a sailor quietly narrating tales of distant lands to a restless leopard, or murmuring legends to a frightened parrot, blending myth and reality as a gentle counterpoint to the vast, indifferent sea. These stories weave a delicate layer of human culture across the otherwise utilitarian endeavor of imperial navigation. By midnight, the fleet exists in a suspended world, human life, animal life, and the endless breathing ocean intertwined in a delicate temporary equilibrium. The horizon is an ink-black mirror of stars above, and you realize that the fleet's true voyage is not merely physical, but existential, a continuous negotiation between order and chaos, courage and superstition, ambition and vulnerability.
You awaken from a brief nap on deck, the cold kiss of night air brushing your cheeks, carrying the scent of brine and the faint tang of distant spices. Lanterns glow softly, their golden light bouncing off the gentle swell, illuminating bundles of cargo and the occasional animal poking its nose into the open air.
The deck is quiet now, save for the soft murmur of sailors on night watch, the distant creak of rigging, and the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull. You inhale deeply, feeling the pulse of life aboard these colossal ships, a heartbeat that seems at once human and mechanical, bound by the will of an emperor and the rhythm of the ocean.
Dawn arrives slowly, painting the horizon with soft strokes of coral and lavender, the sky reflecting gently off the undulating water. You step onto the deck, the wood still damp with the lingering moisture of night, and notice the fleet stretching like a string of enormous, moving islands across the vast ocean. Sailors begin their morning routines, hauling ropes, adjusting sails, and murmuring to themselves or animals as if speaking aloud could soothe the waves themselves. You take a deep breath and feel the faint taste of salt on your lips, a reminder that even amidst imperial grandeur, survival depends on something as simple as staying hydrated and keeping your footing. A mainstream historical fact: the treasure fleet traveled vast distances along trade networks spanning Southeast Asia, the Indian subcontinent, and East Africa, carrying gifts of silk, porcelain, and silver, while also bringing back spices, exotic animals, and knowledge about distant lands. Historians still argue whether the fleet's true goal was to establish tributary relations, project military power, or simply display the grandeur of the Ming Dynasty, though evidence suggests all three motives coexisted in a delicate balance. A quirky tidbit: some crew members were tasked with maintaining tiny botanical experiments aboard ship, cultivating small pots of herbs or flowers to improve air quality, provide minor medicinal supplies, or simply as a comfort to the sailors. You can imagine bending over a miniature plant, feeling a fleeting connection to the distant lands you left behind, or perhaps imagining the landfall to come and the new flora that might greet you. The rhythm of the fleet is mesmerizing. Every movement seems synchronized, yet each ship remains an individual organism, responding to wind and wave in its own way. Officers move among the decks, checking manifests, issuing commands, and occasionally glancing at the horizon as if they could read the ocean like a book. Historians still argue whether the fleet's cohesion relied more on strict hierarchy or on the adaptability of individual sailors, but for now the deck operates with a serene, almost hypnotic precision. Animals aboard provide both amusement and stress. Cranes preen delicately as they adjust the rocking deck, leopards stretch lazily in their pens, and monkeys scurry with playful curiosity. A fringe tidbit: some chroniclers mention that sailors kept small journals of animal behavior, noting peculiar habits and even attempting to interpret them as omens or predictors of weather changes. You imagine a sailor scribbling observations in a damp notebook, glancing nervously at darkening clouds while a monkey snatches a pencil, adding its own chaotic commentary. Meals are prepared meticulously, with cooks balancing the need for nutrition and taste while maintaining discipline in the face of limited supplies. Sailors share laughter over minor mishaps, like spilled rice or a playful monkey stealing a morsel of meat. The humor is quiet, understated, yet essential, threading through the long days and nights to maintain morale. Historians still argue whether these small rituals and diversions were critical to the fleet's endurance or simply charming anecdotes in retrospect. As midday approaches, the sun climbs high and the deck glows with a harsh brilliance. You feel the weight of the fleet's scale. Hundreds of ships, tens of thousands of people, and countless animals, all moving across an ocean that could easily swallow any misstep. You consider the vast planning involved: the storage of food, water, and equipment, the management of human and animal passengers, the constant observation of weather patterns and celestial bodies. Historians still debate whether the fleet could have survived without such careful planning, or if sheer maritime skill and courage were equally decisive. By evening, clouds gather, casting shadows across the deck. The wind picks up, testing ropes, sails, and nerves. Sailors adjust sails with practiced hands, murmuring to each other, while officers issue commands over the rising roar of waves. You feel the subtle thrill of tension, the mixture of fear and excitement that defines life at sea, particularly on such a vast and unprecedented expedition. Fringe tidbit: some sailors reportedly consulted local maps and sailor tales passed down orally, blending empirical navigation with folklore, hoping to predict storms or currents.
You picture the exchange of whispered knowledge, the cautious optimism of men who know the ocean can defy even the most precise calculations.
The morning sun rises slowly, casting a golden glow that dances across the waves, warming the deck beneath your feet. You lean against a mast, feeling the gentle sway of the ship, and notice the subtle interplay of light and shadow among the rigging, barrels, and crates. The fleet stretches out before you like a ribbon of human ambition, each vessel moving in silent coordination, yet individually alive with the sounds, smells, and motions of countless crew members. The ocean sparkles, betraying nothing of its depth or potential danger, a calm facade masking the vast unknown that lies beneath. A mainstream historical fact. Zhang He's expeditions carried gifts designed to impress foreign rulers, ranging from intricately woven silk to exotic animals captured in distant lands. These items were meant not only to establish diplomatic relations, but also to convey the immense wealth and technological prowess of the Ming Dynasty. Historians still debate whether the primary aim was genuine diplomacy or an extravagant display of imperial power, though it's clear both motives coexisted. As you watch, you notice the crew preparing for another long day at sea. Sailors haul ropes, check rigging, and peer intently at the horizon. Some are quietly tending to the animals, cranes preening, monkeys grooming one another, leopards stretching lazily in their pens. Quirky tidbit: sailors reportedly kept small notebooks detailing animal behavior, interpreting subtle cues from the creatures as potential forecasts of weather patterns or indicators of upcoming challenges. The blend of superstition and observation illustrates the human desire to assert understanding over an environment that is fundamentally uncontrollable. You imagine the fleet as a living organism, each ship a pulse in the larger body. Officers issue commands with calm authority, while ordinary sailors execute tasks with practiced precision. Historians still argue whether this cohesion relied more on strict hierarchical discipline or on the adaptability of individual crews, but standing here, the effectiveness of the system is undeniable. The ships glide across the water with a quiet dignity, a testament to meticulous planning, exceptional craftsmanship, and human endurance. Meals are prepared with careful attention to both nutrition and taste. Cooks labor over steaming pots, balancing limited resources to sustain thousands of men and animals. You picture sailors sharing quiet jokes over small mishaps, a spill bowl of rice, a playful monkey grabbing a piece of bread, and realize these moments of levity are critical, threading humanity through the otherwise mechanical rhythm of life aboard ship. Fringe tidbit: some crew members were known to compose songs and rhymes about their journey, singing to pass the time, maintain morale, or simply distract themselves from the monotony and anxiety of the open sea. You can almost hear their melodies drifting across the water, merging with the creak of timbers and the whisper of waves. By afternoon, the sun climbs high, casting long shadows and turning the ocean into a sheet of molten silver. You wander along the deck, observing the intricate choreography of sailors adjusting sails, maintaining cargo, and keeping watch. Officers consult charts, make notes, and occasionally exchange orders across ships. The fleet seems endless, a city of wood and cloth floating upon the water, and you feel the enormity of its ambition pressing gently against your imagination. Historians still debate whether such vast coordination would have been possible without advanced planning, or whether the human element, intuition, experience, and adaptability, played an equally vital role. The animals aboard add both charm and challenge to the daily routine. Cranes stretch their wings, leopards yawn lazily, monkeys scamper with mischievous energy, and exotic birds call to one another across pens. Fringe tidbit: sailors sometimes use simple games or exercises to keep the animals calm, inventing makeshift swings or offering small treats to prevent restlessness that could jeopardize the delicate balance of life aboard ship. You smile at the ingenuity, imagining a sailor dangling a string to entertain a restless monkey while keeping one wary eye on the horizon. As evening approaches, the sky blushes with pinks and purples, and the fleet slows in response to changing wind patterns. Sailors tie down cargo, adjust sails for the night, and whisper to the animals in tones meant to soothe. Lanterns are lit, casting a warm glow that contrasts the deepening blue of the ocean.
You notice officers conducting quiet checks, ensuring that all ships remain aligned and no crew members are left unaccounted for. Historians still argue whether such nightly routines were purely functional, or if they also carried ceremonial or symbolic significance, embedding a subtle sense of ritual into the voyage. Nightfall deepens, stars scattered across the sky like scattered jewels. You lean on the rail, feeling the gentle roll of the ship beneath your hands, and sense the fragile balance that allows the fleet to continue its journey. The ocean is vast, mysterious, and indifferent, yet human ambition persists, threading life, laughter, superstition, and strategy across thousands of miles of open water. Quirky tidbit. Some sailors kept personal diaries, sketching encounters with marine life or recording superstitious observations, blending meticulous documentation with poetic interpretation. You can almost flip through one of these notebooks, reading about flying fish that glint like sparks of silver, or an albatross gliding across the horizon, portending either fortune or misfortune. The wind picks up slightly, carrying the scent of distant lands you have yet to reach. Sailors murmur prayers, some to Buddhist deities, others to local sea gods, and a few simply mutter wishes for safe passage. Historians still debate whether these spiritual practices influenced outcomes or merely provided psychological comfort, but the effect on morale is undeniable. The human need for ritual, even when faced with the randomness of the ocean, is a constant thread in this tapestry of ambition, courage, and curiosity. By midnight, the fleet moves as a singular entity, a river of wooden fortresses gliding across black water. Lanterns flicker, shadows stretch and shrink, and the faint hum of voices mixes with the rhythm of waves and the creak of timbers. Animals sleep fitfully, sailors nod off, and officers maintain vigilant watches. Fringe tidbit: legends tell of crew members claiming to hear whispers from distant lands carried by the wind, faintly hinting at the adventures, dangers, and discoveries yet to come. You feel the weight of possibility pressing around you, the promise of new lands, the pull of home, and the enigmatic question of whether all will return. The horizon remains infinite, the stars above unchanging, and you sense the duality of the voyage, one of physical movement across oceans, and another of internal journey, mapping courage, hope, superstition, and human ingenuity across thousands of miles of open water. Historians still argue whether the fleet's disappearance was due to natural causes, political decisions, or a combination of factors. But for now, in the quiet of the night, the debate fades into the timeless rhythm of sea and sky, carrying both mystery and wonder forward into the unknown.
The first light of dawn seeps slowly into the sky, a muted wash of pink and orange that glints off the rolling waves. You walk along the deck, feeling the subtle give of the timbers beneath your feet, the scent of salt and varnish mingling in the air. The fleet is alive with morning activity, sailors hauling ropes, adjusting sails, and murmuring in low tones as if their voices might soothe the restless ocean. You pause for a moment, tracing the intricate knots that secure cargo and imagining the countless hours of labor, skill, and experience that went into each one. A mainstream historical fact: the treasure fleet often carried hundreds of tons of silk, porcelain, and spices, which were carefully inventoried and stored to prevent spoilage or damage during long ocean voyages. The meticulous record-keeping reflected both bureaucratic rigor and the importance placed on diplomacy and trade. Historians still argue whether these inventories were primarily for practical purposes or for impressing foreign rulers with the sheer scale of imperial wealth. Quirky tidbit: some sailors reportedly used small carved figurines as lucky charms, believing that tiny statues of animals or deities could protect their ship from storms or misfortune. You picture a monkey perched near one such figurine, curiously pawing at it, while a sailor mutters a quick prayer under his breath. The combination of superstition and routine seems almost charmingly human, even in the face of an unpredictable sea. The fleet's sheer scale is staggering. You watch as ships glide across the horizon in orderly procession, each vessel appearing like a small island, complete with humans, animals, and supplies. Officers move along the decks with calm authority, issuing directions and maintaining vigilance, while sailors carry out orders with practiced precision. Historians still debate whether the success of the fleet relied more on hierarchical discipline or the adaptability and experience of individual sailors, but either way, the coordination is impressive. Animals aboard provide both entertainment and subtle tension. Cranes stretch their wings in the early morning light, leopards yawn lazily in their enclosures, and monkeys scurry along the rigging. Fringe tidbit: some records indicate that sailors kept informal logs of animal behavior, noting patterns, moods, or reactions to storms, often interpreting these as omens for the voyage ahead. You imagine flipping through one of these journals, reading a sailor's observations of a restless leopard predicting a sudden squall, blending careful observation with superstition. Meal preparations begin in earnest. Large cauldrons bubble with rice, beans, and preserved meats, while sailors line up with wooden bowls to receive their share. You notice small, humorous exchanges. A monkey snatches a piece of bread, prompting a sailor to chase it across the deck, and someone spills a ladle of soup, eliciting quiet laughter. Historians still argue whether such light-hearted moments were incidental or vital for morale, but the importance of humor in long voyages seems undeniable. By late morning, the sun climbs higher, casting sharp shadows and illuminating the textures of the fleet. The polished wood of hulls, the taut white sails, the worn lines of sailors' faces. Officers consult maps and charts, tracing potential routes and making mental notes about currents, tides, and wind patterns. Historians still debate the extent to which the fleet relied on advanced navigation techniques versus local knowledge or oral tradition, but the combination of skill and intuition is evident. As midday approaches, the ocean appears both infinite and intimate, its rolling waves echoing the rhythm of human activity aboard the ships. You feel the paradox of being both tiny and significant, just one presence among thousands, yet a witness to a journey of extraordinary ambition. Fringe tidbit: sailors sometimes engraved tiny messages or symbols onto ship timbers, believing that these markings could offer protection or good fortune. You imagine tracing a finger over such an engraving, feeling a connection to generations of voyagers who believed that small acts could influence fate. Afternoon brings changes in wind and weather. Sailors adjust sails, tighten rigging, and scan the horizon for threats or navigational markers. You hear faint chants, perhaps prayers, perhaps simple songs to keep spirits high. Historians still argue whether ritualized chants and songs significantly impacted morale or was simply a reflection of cultural practice. But standing here, you recognize their subtle power to unite a crew under stress. The animals begin to stir again. Cranes call to one another, leopards shift in their pens, and monkeys scurry along the rigging. Fringe tidbit: some crew members carried portable musical instruments to entertain animals and distract them during rough seas. You imagine a sailor strumming a simple lute, the notes mingling with the wind, as a monkey tilts its head in curiosity. The interaction is small but meaningful, a gentle reminder of human ingenuity and empathy. Evening falls, painting the sky with dusky purples and deep blues. Lanterns are lit, casting warm pools of light across decks. Sailors tie down cargo, perform checks, and settle into quieter routines. Officers ensure alignment, monitor watch rotations, and quietly discuss plans for the next day. Historians still debate whether these nightly routines had ceremonial aspects or were purely functional, but the discipline and care are apparent. Night deepens, stars scattered across the sky like sparkling notes in a silent symphony. The ocean hums beneath the ships, the gentle rocking of timbers forming a lullaby for those aboard. You feel the weight of history pressing softly against your imagination, the vastness of human ambition mirrored in the vast, unknowable sea. Fringe tidbit: some sailors believed in guardian spirits that accompanied the fleet, whispering advice or warnings in dreams. You imagine the fleet enveloped in both reality and myth, carrying courage, curiosity, and hope forward into the night. The horizon remains infinite, the stars above steady, and you recognize the duality of this voyage, one of physical distance across oceans and another of human perseverance, creativity, and wonder. Historians still argue about the reasons for the fleet's eventual disappearance, natural disasters, political decisions, or logistical challenges,
But tonight, none of that matters. For now you are aboard, immersed in the rhythm of human endeavor, the whispers of superstition, and the eternal pull of the unknown.
You wake to a soft haze of dawn spilling over the horizon, the ocean stretching endlessly in every direction. The deck creaks under your weight as you take a slow, deliberate walk along its length, feeling the gentle sway of the ship beneath your feet. Sailors move with methodical precision, adjusting ropes, checking sails, and murmuring to themselves or each other. The scent of salt, seaweed, and freshly hauled provisions mixes in the air, creating a sense of living within the pulse of the ocean itself. This is not just a journey. It is a complex choreography of human endurance, maritime skill, and sheer willpower. A mainstream historical fact: Zheng He's fleet included some of the largest wooden ships ever built, some measuring over 120 meters in length, with 9 masts and multiple decks brimming with goods, soldiers, and crew. The scale of these vessels alone remains a marvel of engineering and logistics, a testament to the Ming Dynasty's ambition. Historians still debate whether the primary purpose of these massive ships was practical, for carrying goods, or symbolic, for displaying imperial grandeur. Quirky tidbit: the fleet reportedly carried spices, exotic fruits, and medicinal plants in secret compartments, sometimes hidden within crates of more mundane goods. Sailors swore that the aroma of cinnamon, nutmeg, or rare herbs could lift morale on bleak days or mask less appealing odors below deck. You can almost smell the faint waft of fragrant spices as you walk past a barrel, imagining the small comfort these scents provided to tired and anxious sailors. The rhythm of life aboard the fleet is hypnotic. Officers consult charts and compasses while whispering instructions to subordinates. Sailors adjust sails, scrub the deck, and carry out routine maintenance, all while keeping a wary eye on the horizon. Historians still argue whether the fleet's cohesion relied more on strict hierarchical command or on the innate skill and intuition of individual crews, but the result is undeniably effective: a city of floating ships moving in synchrony across an unpredictable sea. Animals aboard continue their quiet presence. Cranes stretch and call softly, leopards shift within their pens, and monkeys clamber playfully along the rigging. Fringe tidbit: some sailors believe that observing the animals' reactions could predict weather changes, noting subtle shifts in behavior as harbingers of storms or calm seas. You imagine a crane tilting its head toward darkening clouds, or a monkey suddenly restless, signaling a coming squall, and realize how humans instinctively sought patterns in the natural world. Meals are prepared with astonishing efficiency. Rice, beans, dried meats, and vegetables are portioned into wooden bowls, distributed in careful rotation. You watch the camaraderie among sailors: quiet jokes, shared bites, playful chases after a mischievous monkey. Historians still debate whether such social interactions were merely incidental or essential to maintaining morale, but the laughter and shared human connection are palpable. Fringe tidbit: some sailors wrote short poems or limericks during meals, turning mundane moments into small celebrations of creativity and resilience. The sun climbs higher, casting stark shadows and illuminating every curve and line of the fleet's impressive hulls. Officers trace imagined lines across charts, calculating distances, wind patterns, and navigational possibilities. Historians still debate whether these navigational strategies relied more on empirical observation, celestial calculations, or accumulated experience passed down orally. Regardless, the skill is undeniable, and standing here, you feel the quiet hum of intelligence and precision driving the fleet forward. As the afternoon drifts lazily on, the ocean takes on a deeper blue, and the wind shifts in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. Sailors adjust sails and rigging to catch the lightest breath of air, a dance perfected through countless hours of trial, error, and experience. Fringe tidbit: some crew members use tiny wind chimes or strings of shells to detect subtle changes in wind direction or intensity, blending superstition with practical observation. You imagine the gentle tinkle of these instruments mixing with the rhythmic lapping of waves against the hull. Evening approaches slowly, painting the horizon in shades of crimson and violet. Lanterns are lit across the fleet, their soft glow reflecting in the gentle swell of the sea. Sailors tie down cargo, check animals, and rotate watch shifts. Historians still argue whether the lighting of lanterns served merely functional purposes or also carried symbolic or morale-boosting significance, but the warm glow is undeniably comforting. You feel the gentle pulse of life continuing despite the vastness of the surrounding ocean.
Night descends fully, and the stars scatter across the sky like glittering guideposts. The fleet moves with silent determination, the creak of timbers and the murmur of voices blending with the rhythmic pulse of the waves. Fringe tidbit: some sailors claim to hear distant music or whispered messages carried by the wind, blending imagination, fatigue, and superstition into the endless night. You stand at the railing, imagining the fleet as both a physical entity and a living tapestry of human ingenuity, hope, and courage floating into the unknown. The duality of the voyage becomes clear: a journey of tangible distance across vast oceans, and an internal journey of perseverance, adaptability, and subtle human rituals. Historians still debate the fleet's eventual disappearance, whether due to storms, politics, or simple misfortune. But for tonight, you are immersed in the immediacy of life aboard. The rhythm, the smells, the laughter, the tiny superstitions, and the omnipresent sea weave together into a hypnotic, enduring narrative of human adventure.
The sun rises again, brushing the ocean with a muted gold, and you find yourself walking along the deck, feeling the gentle sway of the ships beneath you. Sailors move with quiet precision, adjusting sails, checking knots, and whispering to one another in low tones that almost seem to blend with the hum of the sea. The aroma of salt, wood, and the lingering scent of morning meals creates a comforting atmosphere, reminding you that life continues in its own rhythm, even far from land. You notice the interplay of duty and improvisation among the crew, a delicate balance that keeps this floating city alive. A mainstream historical fact: Zheng Hao's treasure fleet included an estimated 27,000 men, including sailors, soldiers, diplomats, scholars, and servants, all coordinated across dozens of massive vessels. The scale of human organization required is staggering, and historians still debate how such a large force maintained efficiency and morale over long voyages. You imagine the intricacies of daily routines, meals, and duties, all carefully orchestrated to prevent chaos on the open sea. Quirky tidbit: some sailors carried miniature charm figurines representing various deities, believed to bring luck or safety during storms. You picture a monk-like figure in a sailor's pocket, peeking out at the waves, while the wind tugs at sails and rigging. The blend of superstition and practical action creates a subtle, almost invisible layer of reassurance, allowing the human mind to find comfort in the unpredictable world of the ocean. The deck is alive with activity. Officers consult maps and charts, murmuring about distances, winds, and currents. Sailors haul ropes and maintain the intricate network of rigging that keeps these colossal ships on course. Historians still argue whether the fleet's precision relied more on strict hierarchy or on the accumulated skill and intuition of individual sailors. Either way, the coordination is mesmerizing. Dozens of ships moving in near-perfect synchrony across an ever-changing, unpredictable ocean. Animals on board continue their quiet routines. Cranes call softly to each other, leopards shift in their pens, and monkeys swing playfully along ropes. Fringe tidbit: some sailors kept detailed notes on animal behavior, believing these observations could foretell weather changes or other events at sea. You imagine a crane tilting its head toward dark clouds or a monkey's restlessness signaling a storm, blending observation with superstition, and see the subtle interplay of nature and human perception. Mealtimes bring a rhythm of their own. Rice, dried meats, vegetables, and preserved fruits are portioned out, with sailors lining up quietly to receive their rations. You notice shared jokes, playful scuffles, and the occasional chase of a mischievous monkey stealing a morsel of food. Historians still debate whether such moments of levity were incidental or essential for morale, but the laughter and small bursts of human connection seem undeniably valuable. Fringe tidbit: some sailors composed short rhymes or limericks during meals, adding humor and creativity to routine life aboard. The sun climbs higher, revealing every detail of the fleet:
polished hulls, taut sails, and the disciplined yet fluid motion of crew members. Officers consult navigation tools, measuring distances and plotting routes. Historians still argue whether these calculations relied more on celestial observation, empirical knowledge, or oral traditions passed through generations, but the combination of technique and intuition is evident. Afternoon brings subtle shifts in wind and weather. Sailors adjust sails, tighten ropes, and observe small changes in wave patterns. Fringe tidbit: some crew members used shells or tiny chimes as primitive instruments to detect subtle variations in wind direction. You imagine the gentle tinkle of shells mingling with the whisper of the sea, a quiet symphony blending practical observation with human creativity. Evening arrives slowly, casting long shadows across the decks. Lanterns are lit, spreading warm light that illuminates sailors finishing their duties. Animals settle into their pens, officers discuss plans for the next day, and the hum of the sea continues beneath the fleet. Historians still argue whether the lighting of lanterns was purely functional or also carried symbolic or morale-boosting purposes, but the comforting glow cannot be denied. Night deepens, and stars scatter across the sky, mirrored faintly in the gently rippling water. Sailors rotate through watches, performing tasks quietly, and the soft creak of timbers blends with the distant cries of seabirds. Fringe tidbit: some sailors claim to hear distant ethereal music or whispers on the wind, a combination of imagination, fatigue, and superstition, a reminder that human perception stretches far beyond the visible. Standing at the railing, you watch the fleet drift through the night, realizing the duality of this voyage, the tangible journey across the ocean, and the invisible journey of human hope, endurance, and ritual. Historians still debate the reasons for the fleet's eventual disappearance: storms, political decisions, or logistical failures, but tonight, you are suspended in the present, immersed in the ebb and flow of life aboard a marvel of human endeavor.
Morning breaks slowly, painting the horizon in soft pinks and muted golds, and you walk along the deck, feeling the familiar sway of the massive ship beneath your feet. Sailors move with practiced precision, their voices low but steady, coordinating the endless adjustments of sails, rigging, and cargo. The smell of salt, wood polish, and lingering food from breakfast hangs in the air, a comforting reminder of the ship's human heartbeat. You notice small details: the pattern of rope coils, the way sunlight glances off polished wood, the quiet interactions between officers and sailors, and feel the quiet rhythm of life aboard this colossal fleet. A mainstream historical fact: Xinghe's treasure fleet carried a wide array of exotic goods, from silks and porcelain to spices and precious metals, designed to awe foreign rulers and cement diplomatic ties. Historians still debate whether the fleet's emphasis on opulence was more for trade, political leverage, or imperial prestige, but the spectacle itself was undeniably impressive. You imagine the care taken in packing delicate porcelain, the weight of silk bales, and the meticulous accounting needed to keep track of it all. Quirky tidbit: some ships reportedly carried mechanical clocks, compasses, and astrolabes for navigation, alongside small decorative items for entertainment. Sailors amused themselves with puzzles or miniature games carved from ivory or wood, a humanizing glimpse into their long days at sea. You picture a young deckhand concentrating over a tiny wooden puzzle, oblivious to the vast expanse of the ocean around him, a small island of normalcy in the chaos of maritime life. The deck hums with organized chaos. Officers consult charts, adjust courses, and oversee the proper handling of goods. Sailors haul ropes, scrub the decks, and secure cargo while remaining alert for sudden changes in weather. Historians still argue whether the fleet's operational efficiency stemmed from strict hierarchical control or a culture of mutual responsibility and skilled improvisation. Either way, the coordination is mesmerizing, a ballet of human effort guided by necessity and instinct. Animals on board continue to provide both practical and psychological comfort. Cranes crane their long necks, leopards shift and yawn in their pens, and monkeys swing along ropes,
occasionally stealing a sailor's snack. Fringe tidbit: sailors often interpreted the behavior of animals as omens, believing that restlessness or unusual activity could foretell storms or other events. You imagine a crane pausing, staring at distant clouds, as if giving silent warnings to the crew below. Mealtime brings a structured rhythm. Rice, dried fish, beans, and occasional spices are portioned out to groups of sailors. You watch quiet exchanges of humor, playful chases after mischievous monkeys, and the subtle bonds forming through shared sustenance. Historians still debate whether these moments of levity were incidental or essential to morale, but their value is palpable. Fringe tidbit: some sailors wrote short poems or limericks on scraps of paper, turning routine meals into creative pauses, brief escapes from the monotony of the voyage. The sun climbs higher, illuminating the fleet's vast expanse and highlighting every detail of the ships and their crews. Officers consult navigational instruments, estimating distances and plotting courses. Historians still argue whether these navigational methods were primarily empirical, celestial, or orally transmitted knowledge, but the combined skill of crew and officers is evident. You feel a subtle thrill at the precision required to manage such an operation, recognizing the human intellect and coordination behind every movement of these enormous vessels. Afternoon brings subtle shifts in wind, demanding careful adjustments. Sailors tighten ropes, adjust sails, and monitor currents. Fringe tidbit: some crew members use small chimes or shells to detect slight variations in wind direction, blending superstition with practical observation. You can almost hear the faint tinkle of shells mingling with the whisper of the sea, an unseen orchestra guiding the fleet. Evening descends, painting the horizon in deep purples and fading oranges. Lanterns are lit, casting a warm glow over the decks. Sailors finish their duties, animals settle, and officers review plans for the coming day. Historians still argue whether lighting lanterns was purely functional or also carried symbolic weight, but their glow is undeniably soothing. You feel a quiet sense of continuity and security amidst the vast uncertainty of the open ocean. Night blankets the sea, stars scattered like scattered diamonds across the sky. Sailors rotate through watches, performing quiet tasks as the fleet glides through the gentle waves. Fringe tidbit: some sailors claim to hear faint, distant melodies on the wind, blending imagination, fatigue, and superstition. You stand at the railing, the fleet stretching endlessly in both directions, a living testament to human ambition, endurance, and the interplay of myth and reality. You realize standing there that the treasure fleet is both a physical and psychological marvel. Each routine, superstition, and creative diversion contributes to the delicate balance of life aboard these floating fortresses. Historians still debate the ultimate fate of the fleet: storms, political intervention, or logistical failures. But tonight you are immersed in its ongoing rhythm, experiencing the timeless human story of hope, resilience, and curiosity as it unfolds across the vast, unpredictable ocean.
The morning air carries a faint mist, and you step onto the deck, feeling the subtle sway beneath your feet. The fleet stretches ahead and behind, a vast network of wooden giants, each with its own microcosm of life. Sailors move with quiet precision, ropes coiling and uncoiling, sails snapping softly in the wind. The aroma of salt and wood mingles with faint traces of cooked rice from early breakfast, grounding you in the present, yet your mind drifts across the endless possibilities of this voyage. You pause at the railing, letting the wind tug gently at your cloak, and watch as the horizon slowly widens, revealing an infinite ocean that both challenges and fascinates. A mainstream historical fact: the treasure fleet was remarkable for its ship design, some measuring over 120 meters in length, with multiple decks, elaborate cabins, and reinforced hulls. Historians still argue whether the engineering achievements were primarily innovations for naval supremacy or practical solutions to logistical challenges, but the sheer scale is undeniable. You imagine the carpenters and shipwrights hammering, planing, and measuring, their work transforming timber into floating fortresses capable of surviving months at sea. Quirky tidbit: some ships reportedly had small gardens or potted plants on board, meant to boost morale and provide a touch of home.
You picture a sailor tending to a tiny herb garden amidst the hull's shadowy corridors, the scent of basil and mint offering brief relief from salt and sea spray. These miniature gardens are symbols of human adaptability, a reminder that even in the most extreme conditions, comfort and normalcy can be sought. The fleet hums with activity. Officers consult maps and charts, muttering about distances, tides, and wind patterns. Sailors haul ropes and adjust sails, while others carry messages between decks. Historians still debate whether communication was strictly hierarchical or relied heavily on informal channels and learned intuition among the crew. Either way, the coordination is remarkable, a living organism functioning across miles of timber and canvas. Animals on board continue their quiet routines. Cranes stretch their long necks, leopards yawn in their pens, and monkeys swing playfully along ropes. Fringe tidbit: sailors sometimes study these animals to predict weather changes, noting shifts in behavior as potential signs of approaching storms. You watch a crane, its head tilted toward distant clouds, and imagine a sailor jotting down observations, blending superstition with empirical knowledge as the rhythm of life continues across the ocean. Meal preparations bring another layer of organization. Rice, dried fish, and preserved vegetables are distributed among sailors, officers, and soldiers. You hear quiet laughter, playful teasing, and the occasional clatter of dishes. Historians still debate whether these moments of levity were incidental or vital to morale, but their effect is undeniable. Fringe tidbit: some crew members crafted small poems or songs, sung quietly to pass time or entertain their comrades, adding a layer of cultural richness to daily routines. The sun climbs higher, illuminating each ship and casting sparkling reflections across the water. Officers consult navigational tools and oversee adjustments. Historians still argue whether the fleet's navigational success relied more on celestial observation, practical seamanship, or accumulated oral knowledge, but the precision and skill on display is extraordinary. You imagine a young sailor tracing constellations, feeling the weight of responsibility mixed with awe as the stars guide the course. Afternoon brings subtle changes in wind and current. Sailors tighten ropes, adjust sails, and monitor the motion of the waves. Fringe tidbit: some sailors use small wind chimes or shells as primitive instruments, interpreting their sounds as subtle indicators of changing wind patterns. You picture the delicate tinkle blending with the natural hum of the ocean, a human attempt to read nature's subtle signals and adapt accordingly. Evening descends slowly, painting the horizon with shades of purple, orange, and deep blue. Lanterns are lit across the decks, casting warm pools of light that guide sailors as they finish their tasks. Animals settle, officers review plans, and the crew prepares for night watches. Historians still debate whether lantern placement served purely practical purposes or carried symbolic meaning, but the gentle glow offers comfort against the vast, dark expanse of the ocean. Night envelops the fleet. Stars scatter across the sky, mirrored faintly in the rippling water. Sailors rotate through watches, perform quiet tasks, and whisper prayers or songs into the night. Fringe tidbit: some sailors claim to hear faint music or voices in the wind, blending imagination, fatigue, and superstition. You stand at the railing, feeling the enormity of the voyage, the simultaneous insignificance and importance of each human aboard, and the delicate interplay between the fleet's material reality and the myths it generates. You realize that each routine, observation, and superstition forms a subtle web that holds the fleet together. Historians still debate what ultimately caused the disappearance of Shang He's fleet: storm, policy, or some combination of failures. But tonight, you are immersed in its living rhythm, experiencing the voyage as an ongoing testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and the enduring allure of the unknown.
A faint haze clings to the morning air as you walk across the deck, the rhythm of the ship beneath your feet becoming almost meditative. Sailors move in practiced unison,
adjusting sails, coiling ropes, and exchanging quiet remarks, their actions a mixture of necessity and ritual. The smell of salt and pine wood mingles with traces of morning porridge, creating an olfactory map of life aboard the treasure fleet. You pause at the railing, feeling the gentle tug of the waves against the hull, and gaze toward the horizon, imagining the far-off lands the fleet is destined to encounter. A mainstream historical fact, Zheng He's voyages extended to ports as far as the east coast of Africa, establishing tributary relationships and transporting both gifts and information between distant regions. Historians still debate whether these missions were primarily diplomatic, commercial, or a demonstration of imperial power, but the scope of the fleet's reach is indisputable. You picture navigators and interpreters poring over maps, their minds filled with exotic ports, unknown cultures, and the logistical challenge of sustaining thousands of men across thousands of miles. A quirky tidbit, some ships reportedly carried exotic animals such as giraffes, ostriches, and elephants, intended to impress foreign rulers. You imagine the careful routines required to feed and tend to these animals aboard wooden decks. The juxtaposition of wild creatures in the controlled environment of a ship, creating both spectacle and subtle chaos. A sailor might wake to the trumpeting of an elephant or the startled flutter of an ostrich, blending awe with the constant work of survival.
A gentle breeze brushes your face as you lean against the railing, feeling the ship's subtle sway. The horizon stretches endlessly, each ripple catching the morning light like scattered jewels across a liquid canvas. Sailors move with a quiet, disciplined energy, hauling ropes, adjusting sails, and murmuring among themselves. The scent of salt, wood, and faintly cooked rice weaves together, grounding you in this moment even as your mind drifts across the vast expanse of ocean ahead. You pause, imagining the destinations of these ships, the bustling ports of India, the spice-laden markets of Malacca, and the distant, mysterious coasts of Africa. A mainstream historical fact, the treasure fleet carried thousands of men, including soldiers, diplomats, scholars, and artisans, each with specific duties to maintain order, security, and the prestige of the Ming Dynasty. Historians still argue whether such a massive workforce was strictly necessary for the fleet's operations or partly a demonstration of imperial grandeur, yet the sheer scale is awe-inspiring. You picture navigators poring over charts, scholars debating celestial patterns, and soldiers maintaining watch, a carefully choreographed symphony of human effort across water. A quirky tidbit, some vessels reportedly contained miniature libraries and study chambers, allowing scholars to continue their work even in the midst of the open sea. You imagine a scholar squinting under lantern light, brushing sea spray from delicate pages of texts on astronomy, geography, or philosophy, adding a quiet intellectual pulse to the living organism of the fleet. Such dedication to knowledge seems almost absurd against the backdrop of roaring waves and creaking timbers, yet it flourishes. As the sun climbs higher, the routine of the fleet becomes almost hypnotic. Sailors scrub decks, officers confer in hushed tones, and carpenters repair minor damages. Historians still debate whether the strict hierarchies aboard were balanced with informal collaboration, but the efficiency is undeniable. Fringe tidbit, some crew members used intricate knots not only for practical purposes, but also as personal signatures, tiny codes of identity woven into the fabric of daily labor. You imagine the satisfaction of creating both utility and expression in a single twist of rope. The exotic animals aboard continue to fascinate. Cranes stretch and preen, monkeys swing along ropes, and leopards rest in shaded pens. Some sailors believe the animals could predict weather changes, noting agitation or restlessness as signs of impending storms. You watch a monkey freeze mid-leap, sensing the tension in the air, and consider how superstition and observation merge into survival strategies at sea. Meals remain a vital rhythm.
Rice, beans, dried fish, and spiced meats are portioned with care. Sailors joke quietly, teasing one another between bites. Historians still argue whether such light-hearted interactions were purely incidental or essential for maintaining morale on prolonged voyages. Fringe tidbit, sailors often composed short songs or rhymes to pass time, blending humor with narrative storytelling that kept their spirits buoyed even amid isolation. You hum one of these imagined melodies softly, letting the rhythm match the gentle rocking of the ship. Afternoon brings subtle changes in wind and current. Sailors adjust sails and monitor navigation instruments. Historians still debate whether the fleet relied more heavily on celestial observation, oral navigation knowledge, or empirical experimentation, yet the coordinated execution demonstrates remarkable seamanship. You picture a navigator balancing observation and intuition, feeling the immense responsibility to guide thousands across an unpredictable ocean. Evening arrives in a palette of purples, oranges, and deep blues. Lanterns illuminate the decks, casting warm glows on faces, ropes, and timbers. Officers review charts, and sailors finish tasks while animals settle. Historians still argue whether lantern placement had symbolic meaning in addition to practical necessity, but the soft lighting reassures all aboard against the vast, dark expanse. Night descends, and the stars scatter overhead. Watches rotate, quiet duties continue, and whispers or soft songs drift through the air. Fringe tidbit, sailors occasionally reported hearing imagined music in the wind, a blend of fatigue, imagination, and superstition. You lean against the railing, contemplating the delicate balance of human endeavor, discipline, and hope that sustains the fleet through calm and storm alike. Every routine, every gesture aboard the fleet contributes to the larger narrative of ambition, curiosity, and the enduring mystery of human endeavor at sea. Historians still debate what ultimately led to the disappearance of Zheng He's fleet, but for tonight, you are immersed in the living rhythm of one of history's most remarkable maritime achievements, witnessing its pulse and quiet grandeur as it unfolds across an infinite ocean.
Morning light breaks across the deck, filtering through sails that ripple gently in the breeze. You step carefully along the wooden planks, feeling the familiar sway beneath your feet, and breathe in the sharp, salty tang of the sea. Sailors move with a quiet, fluid coordination, adjusting rigging, hauling ropes, and exchanging whispered instructions. The aroma of cooking rice mingles with the natural scent of timber and salt, creating a sensory tapestry that roots you in the rhythm of daily life aboard the treasure fleet. Your gaze drifts to the horizon, where the promise of distant lands beckons, and you imagine the ports of call, bustling with trade, culture, and the unknown. A mainstream historical fact, the treasure fleet's ships were marvels of naval engineering, some with 9 masts and multiple decks, capable of carrying thousands of people along with precious cargo. Historians still argue whether these designs were purely practical innovations or statements of imperial authority, yet the ingenuity is undeniable. You picture carpenters and shipwrights laboring tirelessly, their hands shaping the timber into floating fortresses designed to traverse vast and unpredictable waters. Quirky tidbit. Some vessels reportedly featured intricate carvings and decorative motifs, serving as both art and spiritual protection. You imagine a sailor tracing the carved dragons and phoenixes with calloused fingers, perhaps muttering a silent plea for safety or good fortune. These designs blend utility, beauty, and superstition, reflecting a culture that sees artistry as inseparable from daily life. The rhythm of life aboard is steady and precise. Sailors scrub decks, officers consult navigational charts, and carpenters repair minor damages caused by the ocean's restless motion. Historians still debate whether command aboard the fleet was strictly hierarchical or allowed for informal collaboration, but the coordination across ships is impressive. Fringe tidbit. Some crew members tied intricate knots as personal signatures, a blend of utility, identity, and artistry that transformed labor into subtle self-expression.
Exotic animals add texture and unpredictability to daily routines. Cranes stretch their wings, monkeys swing playfully along ropes, and leopards observe the commotion with measured calm. Some sailors interpreted animal behavior as omens of weather changes, noting that restlessness or unusual activity could signal approaching storms. You watch a crane pause mid-step, alert to some unseen shift, and realize how superstition and careful observation are intertwined in the fleet's survival strategy. Meals maintain a comforting rhythm. Rice, dried fish, beans, and occasionally spiced meats are portioned carefully. Sailors laugh softly, teasing one another between bites. Historians still debate whether these social interactions were incidental or crucial for morale, but the bonds they forge are undeniable. Fringe tidbit: sailors often composed short songs or rhymes to pass time, blending humor with narrative storytelling that kept spirits buoyed even during long stretches at sea. You hum one of these imagined tunes, letting it echo against the gentle rocking of the ship. The sun climbs, casting golden light over decks, sails, and rigging. Officers adjust courses, using celestial observations and accumulated navigational knowledge. Historians still argue whether the fleet's success relied more on empirical observation, inherited wisdom, or careful experimentation, yet the precision and skill displayed are remarkable. You imagine a navigator's careful attention to the position of stars, tides, and clouds, balancing duty and curiosity with each decision. Afternoon brings subtle shifts in wind and current. Sailors adjust sails, check rigging, and maintain awareness of the water's ever-changing patterns. Fringe tidbit: some crew members used small wind chimes or shells as primitive instruments, interpreting their delicate sounds as indicators of wind change. You imagine the tinkle blending with the natural hum of the sea, a human attempt to read and respond to nature's subtle signals. Evening arrives in soft gradients of violet, orange, and deep blue. Lanterns are lit across decks, casting warm glows that offer reassurance against the vast darkness. Officers review plans for the next day, and animals settle into pens. Historians still argue whether lantern placement carried symbolic meaning, but the comforting illumination serves as a unifying presence, reminding all aboard of the structured, ordered life aboard the fleet. Night envelops the treasure fleet. Stars scatter across the sky, mirrored faintly in the water below. Watches rotate, quiet duties continue, and whispers or soft songs drift through the air. Fringe tidbit: sailors occasionally reported hearing distant music or voices on the wind, a mixture of imagination, fatigue, and superstition. You stand at the railing, contemplating the delicate balance of human endeavor, ritual, and hope that sustains this massive undertaking through calm and storm alike. Each routine, each gesture forms a subtle web that binds the fleet together. Historians still debate what ultimately led to the fleet's disappearance: storms, political decisions, or a mixture of causes. But tonight, immersed in the rhythm and quiet grandeur of the voyage, you experience the pulse of one of history's most remarkable maritime achievements, unfolding under the vast, unending sky.
A soft haze blankets the morning, and you stroll along the deck, the gentle sway of the ship synchronizing with your heartbeat. Sailors move with quiet purpose, hauling ropes, adjusting sails, and exchanging brief nods, each task a small but vital contribution to the life of the fleet. The scent of salt and wood mixes with lingering traces of breakfast, grounding you in the sensory reality of the voyage. You lean against the railing, watching the horizon stretch endlessly, imagining the distant ports of call, India, Malacca, and the African coasts, each promising encounters with unfamiliar lands, cultures, and the unknown. A mainstream historical fact: Xing He's treasure fleet spanned hundreds of ships and tens of thousands of crew members, a logistical marvel of the early 15th century. Historians still debate whether the voyages were motivated by diplomacy, trade, military ambition, or a combination, yet the organizational feat is universally acknowledged.
You imagine the complex choreography of movement, labor, and oversight required to sustain such a massive enterprise across thousands of miles of unpredictable sea. Quirky tidbit: some ships carried miniature libraries and study chambers, allowing scholars to continue their work even amidst the waves. You picture a dedicated scholar, hunched over delicate scrolls, squinting under lantern light as the ship pitches gently, interpreting celestial patterns or documenting the flora and fauna of distant lands. The juxtaposition of rigorous study against the chaos of a moving ship is almost humorous, yet entirely true to the ambition of the fleet. Daily life is a blend of extraordinary and mundane. Sailors scrub decks, carpenters patch leaks, and officers confer quietly over charts. Historians still argue whether command structures were strictly hierarchical or if informal collaboration played a significant role, but the efficiency of the fleet's operations is clear. Fringe tidbit: crew members often tied complex knots as personal signatures, creating a subtle form of identity interwoven into their practical labor. You trace an imaginary knot with your fingers, marveling at the artistry in utility. The exotic animals aboard bring both wonder and unpredictability. Cranes stretch their wings, monkeys swing along ropes, and leopards lounge in shaded enclosures. Some sailors believe that animal behavior could predict weather changes, watching agitation or restlessness as subtle warnings of approaching storms. You see a crane pause mid-step, attentive to a shift in the wind, blending superstition with keen observation in a survival strategy that is as practical as it is mystical. Meals are both nourishment and ritual. Rice, beans, dried fish, and spiced meats are carefully portioned, with sailors exchanging soft laughter and jokes between bites. Historians debate whether these light-hearted moments were incidental or essential for morale, but the bonds forged in shared sustenance are undeniable. Fringe tidbit: sailors often tied short songs or rhymes, infusing humor and narrative into the monotony of sea life. You hum along, letting the cadence mirror the gentle rolling of the ship. Afternoon brings subtle shifts in wind and current. Sailors adjust sails, check rigging, and maintain vigilant awareness of the water's ever-changing patterns. Historians still argue whether navigation relied more on empirical observation, inherited knowledge, or celestial guidance, yet the skill of those at the helm is remarkable. You imagine a navigator balancing charts, intuition, and the delicate reading of wind, water, and sky. Evening paints the sky in soft purples, oranges, and deep blues. Lanterns illuminate the decks, casting a warm glow that contrasts the vast darkness surrounding the fleet. Officers review plans for the next day, and sailors complete tasks while animals settle in pens. Historians still debate whether lantern placement had symbolic meaning, but the practical comfort it provides is undeniable. Night descends with a velvet hush. Stars glimmer overhead, mirrored faintly in the calm waves. Watches rotate, quiet tasks continue, and whispers or soft songs drift through the ship. Fringe tidbit: sailors sometimes claim to hear distant melodies or voices on the wind, a combination of imagination, fatigue, and superstition. You stand at the railing, feeling the vastness of the ocean, the weight of human endeavor, and the delicate threads of hope, discipline, and curiosity that sustain the fleet through calm and storm alike. Each gesture, each task, each ritual aboard contributes to a living web of human ambition. Historians still argue what caused the ultimate disappearance of the treasure fleet, but tonight, immersed in the rhythm and quiet majesty of the voyage, you witness the pulse of one of history's most extraordinary maritime achievements unfolding silently beneath an endless sky.
The first light of dawn spills across the deck, painting everything in a soft gold. You move slowly, letting the gentle sway of the ship guide your steps as the crew begins their morning routines. Sailors haul ropes, adjust sails, and check the integrity of the wooden planks beneath their feet. The scent of salt, timber, and lingering traces of breakfast mingles in the air, a comforting reminder of life aboard these majestic vessels. Your gaze drifts toward the horizon, where the infinite stretch of ocean beckons, hinting at distant lands, exotic ports, and the countless mysteries the sea holds. A mainstream historical fact, Zhenghe's treasure fleet was composed of hundreds of ships, some measuring over 120 meters long, carrying tens of thousands of crew members, precious goods, and exotic animals. Historians still debate whether these voyages were primarily diplomatic, commercial, or a display of imperial power, yet the scope and ambition of the fleet remain unparalleled. You imagine the logistical challenge of supplying such a massive flotilla with food, water, and materials, a task requiring meticulous planning, precise coordination, and unwavering discipline. Quirky tidbit: some ships reportedly carried miniature gardens or small orchards, allowing crew and scholars to cultivate plants and experience a semblance of life on land. You picture a scholar carefully tending to delicate herbs, or a sailor sneaking a bite of fruit plucked from these floating green spaces, tiny pleasures amidst the vastness of the ocean. These gardens represent a remarkable blend of practicality, beauty, and comfort in a world dominated by wood, sails, and endless water. Daily life aboard continues in its steady rhythm. Sailors scrub decks, officers consult charts, and carpenters repair minor damages caused by constant movement. Historians still argue whether hierarchical control aboard the fleet was rigid or if informal collaboration among crew members significantly contributed to operational efficiency. Fringe tidbit: some sailors tied intricate knots as personal signatures, a creative outlet embedded in daily labor. You run your fingers along an imagined knot, marveling at the artistry woven into necessity. Exotic animals punctuate the routine. Cranes stretch their wings, monkeys swing along ropes, and leopards watch with measured curiosity. Some sailors interpreted animal behavior as harbingers of weather, noting sudden changes in restlessness or movement. You watch a crane pause mid-step, alert to an imperceptible shift, appreciating how superstition and observation intertwine as subtle survival tools. Meals maintain morale. Rice, dried fish, beans, and spiced meats are carefully portioned and shared. Sailors laugh quietly, teasing one another, a ritual that reinforces camaraderie. Historians still debate whether such interactions were essential for survival or incidental, but the bonds forged in these moments are unmistakable. Fringe tidbit: some sailors often composed short rhymes or songs, blending humor and narrative storytelling to pass long hours at sea. You hum along, letting the rhythm synchronize with the gentle rocking of the ship. Afternoon brings subtle changes in wind and current. Sailors adjust sails and check rigging while maintaining constant awareness of the water's patterns. Historians still argue whether navigation relied more on empirical observation, inherited knowledge, or celestial guidance. You imagine the navigator's careful calculations, balancing intuition with the wisdom of charts, stars, and tides. Evening casts soft purples, oranges, and blues across the deck. Lanterns illuminate the ship, providing a warm, comforting glow. Officers review plans, sailors finish tasks, and animals settle. Historians still debate symbolic meanings in lantern placement, yet the practical and emotional comfort is evident. Night deepens, stars glittering above and reflecting faintly in the water. Watches rotate, quiet tasks continue, and soft songs drift through the air. Fringe tidbit: some sailors sometimes reported hearing distant, ethereal melodies on the wind, a mixture of fatigue, imagination, and superstition. You stand at the railing, feeling the vastness of the ocean and the delicate threads of human endeavor, curiosity, and hope, sustaining the fleet through calm and storm alike. And finally, as the night settles, you allow yourself a slow exhale, letting the vast mystery of the lost treasure fleet linger gently in your mind. All the meticulous labor, the grandeur, the animals, the meals, the songs, the rituals, and the dreams of every sailor combine into a living memory that drifts silently across the ocean.
Historians still argue about the fleet's ultimate fate, whether storms, political decisions, or human choice ended its voyages, but tonight that mystery exists as a quiet companion, a story to cradle you into sleep, full of wonder and awe. You lean against the railing one last time, letting the gentle rocking and distant whisper of waves soothe your thoughts. The fleet sails onward into your imagination, a testament to ambition, curiosity, and the enduring pull of the unknown. The stories, the songs, the knots, the animals, the gardens, and the sheer audacity of the voyage drift in harmony, fading gently into memory as your eyelids grow heavy.
The ocean stretches endlessly in all directions, a soft, dark expanse under the whispering night sky. You feel the gentle rocking of the ship beneath your feet, a natural lullaby orchestrated by the waves themselves. Every sound, the creak of timbers, the rustle of sails, and the distant calls of night birds, blend into a calming rhythm, grounding you in this moment while carrying your mind across oceans, into ports unseen, and along the journeys of countless souls who sailed centuries before. You let the smells of salt, wood, and faint spices wrap around you, a sensory cocoon that slows your breathing and eases tension. The intricate lives of sailors, scholars, and officers, each with their tiny rituals, quiet laughter, and dedicated work, blend seamlessly into the vast tapestry of human endeavor. Even the exotic animals, the miniature gardens, and the songs drifting across decks contribute to a gentle harmony, a lullaby born from ambition, curiosity, and careful coordination. Historians still argue about why Zhang He's treasure fleet vanished into the unknown, but tonight, the mystery does not frighten, it comforts. It reminds you of human courage, the quiet persistence of daily rituals, and the beauty in meticulous planning and simple joys. You imagine the fleet, sailing forever in your mind, each ship a floating palace of dreams, knowledge, and hope. As your eyelids grow heavier, the ocean, the stars, the distant lantern glow, and the gentle hum of life aboard the treasure fleet blend into a serene calm. Let your imagination drift alongside the ships, floating across endless waters, and carry you into deep, restful sleep.